A Friday edition of the Sports Bash. It is Happy Hour Friday. I'm your host, Mike Gill. Josh Henning is producing today's show. You out there, kind of a miserable day out, a little rainy, a little overcast, but we're here for the next 4 with you out there. So we got game 3 tonight. We're going to get you from all the different angles. McGarry in 40 minutes from the Press of Atlantic City. Big local weekend as well. He'll give you the details. There's a huge game today that I know Mike is heading to. So he'll join us on the phone. Paul Hudrick inside the Sixers today. Bob Wankle's going to talk a little bit about the Phillies and the Yankees weekend. You know, my buddy, I tell you, is a Yankees fan. And he asked me if I want to go to the Phillies game tomorrow. And I said, do I really want to go to watch 2 mediocre teams play? And my buddy, God bless him, great dude, nice guy. He has a hard time accepting things, like always wants to make excuses. Well, the Yankees have all these guys hurt. I said, yeah, the Phillies lost their whole lineup. I mean, at one point, they didn't even have a catcher one day. They had one catcher on the roster. You remember the day when Knapp couldn't play? I mean, Real Muto's been on the I said, I'm not making excuses for the Phillies. You could choose to be the Yankee guy that makes excuses for the team that has the highest payroll in baseball. I'll be the other guy. The Phillies' payroll is too high for them to be mediocre. I demand more. Not making excuses. Demand more. You know, I said, well, the Rays, they're just outclassing everybody, and they spend $180 million. Like, if I'm a Yankees fan, I'm embarrassed. As a Phillies fan, you should be embarrassed. Don't make excuses for the Phillies. Yankees fans, don't make excuses for why your team stinks. Injuries aren't a reason. You have more resources to get past injuries. The Phillies have the resources to fix the injury problem. That's the problem. We make excuses for these teams too much. If Bryce Harper goes on the injured list, I get it. That's tough. But here's the thing. In baseball, one player isn't the difference. Like, just having Mike Trout on your team doesn't mean your team is any good. You could have the best player, and that doesn't mean that your team is any good. So we can't make excuses that not having that player is the reason why we stink. Not having Bryce Harper is not why the Phillies stink. They stink because, or I should say they're mediocre, because they're not a well-run organization right now. And I'm not saying this isn't like raining on the Dave Dombrowski parade by any stretch of the imagination. But these 2 teams come in this weekend, and by the way, they don't play tonight for whatever reason. There is no game, no Phillies tonight, which is okay since the Sixers play. But I don't know what Major League Baseball team doesn't play on Friday night. But you have the New York Yankees coming in this weekend, 6 games out of first place. Now, could they overtake the Tampa Bay Rays and gain those 6 games back? Maybe. I doubt it. I don't see any reason to believe that Tampa Bay is going to hit the skids. But the interesting point about this is Tampa Bay keeps losing players, and they don't complain. They lost their ace pitcher. They lost the guy who was their number 1 pitcher. Didn't bother them. They're not making excuses for their injury problems. They're a well-run organization. One guy gets hurt, next guy comes in. So any Yankees fans, or Phillies fans for that matter, this isn't me targeting Yankees fans. Phillies fans are in the same boat. You should all be embarrassed. You should be embarrassed by the fact that I would imagine that the Dodgers spend more money than everybody, and the Yankees are next. Philadelphia is number 5. And just because you spend money doesn't mean you're going to win. But for God's sakes, you should be more than just mediocre. The Tampa Bay Rays, their payroll this year is $68 million. $68 million. The Yankees are 202. My buddy says to me, the Yankees play in the toughest division. And I said, they have more resources than the other 4 teams combined. Boston's payroll is 176. Toronto's is 143. Baltimore's is 28th in the league. The Yankees play in a division where one team spends $68 million and the other spends $56 million. Baltimore spends less than Tampa. The NL East, on the other hand, you've got Philadelphia, the number 5 team. The New York Mets, the number 3 team. The Washington Nationals are 9th. You have 3 of the top payrolls in the East. The National League East. And Atlanta's 14th. So 4 teams in the National League East spend in the top 15. The only team that does not is Miami. They are below Tampa Bay, right between Tampa and Baltimore. So this weekend series is a microcosm of mediocrity. Phillies and Yankees at Citizens Bank Park. Philadelphia, by the way, is 30-31. They have scored 256 runs with a payroll of number 5 in the league of $183.9 million. That is the Phillies payroll. They are above the Los Angeles Angels. They are above the Boston Red Sox. They are above the San Diego Padres. The only teams ahead of Philadelphia in expenditures is Houston, New York Mets, New York Yankees, and the LA Dodgers. Well, I'm guaranteeing you right now that the LA Dodgers are going to make the playoffs. So they're going to get their return on investment. The Houston Astros are 1 game out of first place. The New York Mets, God bless them, they're in first place. The only 2 teams in the top 5 of payroll, the 2 teams that meet tonight. The Yankees spend the 2nd most money in baseball. The Phillies spend the 5th most money in baseball. The Yankees are 6 games out. The Phillies are 3.5. I get injuries. Injuries. If this guy got No, injuries are part of the problem. When you get guys that get hurt, you should have the resources to get by. And we talked about this at the start of yesterday's show. Philadelphia doesn't have the resources. Their farm system is a disaster. They are an absolute mess. Nick Maton, Luke Williams, those kind of guys. That's what happens. You know, my buddy says to me, well, take out your 2nd and 3rd best pitcher. I got news for you. The pitching's not their problem. The Yankees' pitching has been good. You know, take out their best reliever, their first baseman, their center fielder. See how many games you win. I've watched it. The Phillies have lost Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, Didi Gregorius. They're on their 4th center fielder. But to me, that's not the problem. I'm not making excuses for that. No excuses because of Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, 4 center fielders. You've lost Archie Bradley. You've lost a couple other bullpen arms along the way. No, the team is average. They're mediocre. Stop making excuses for them. If you're going to spend the money, if you have the resources to spend that kind of money and your team is mediocre, that means your team is poorly run. When you are the New York Yankees and the Philadelphia Phillies and you are getting outclassed by the Tampa Bay Rays, and I mean, look, in the National League East, to be fair, Philadelphia is at least behind the Mets, who spend more money than they do. The Mets spend the 3rd most money in baseball. Philadelphia's 5th. So by that, the Phillies are kind of where they are. They should be in the division at least, but not in the overall grand scheme of things. I mean, even the Dodgers, who spend the most money in baseball, they are a game and a half out behind the San Francisco Giants, who, by the way, the San Francisco Giants, managed by Gabe Kapler, are the 11th highest payroll in baseball. You know, payroll isn't the be-all, end-all, but when you have the resources to do what these teams do, you shouldn't be in the spot that you're in. And the Yankees tonight, and the Phillies, I should say tomorrow, they play at 4 o'clock. This series is a microcosm of mediocrity. That's what this is. He says, you want to go to the game tomorrow? It's Phillies Yankees. And I'm thinking, this is a microcosm of mediocrity. It is exactly the antithesis of what is awful about where you are in that sport, being the middleman. You know, it's progressively becoming like basketball. You don't want to be the team stuck in the middle. But I look at the Phillies and I look at the Yankees, and I'm looking at two teams that kind of sadly mirror each other. And you might say, how do they mirror each other? They mirror each other by the fact of they're underperforming and overpaid. You know, when the Yankees went out and they made the playoffs last year, they got Garrett Cole. And when they made that trade a couple of years ago and they got Stanton and they already had Judge, and you're like, my God, they got Stanton and Judge. I mean, how's this fair? They went out and got Chapman and they traded him and they got him back. How's this fair? Well, money can't buy you everything. And even when guys get hurt, you have the resources, you need to do better. You know, when you are at the point where if Luke Voit gets hurt, that your whole first base situation turns into the mess that the Yankees have had, that is a poorly run organization, that you don't have a first baseman. For God's sakes, they tried to play Jay Bruce at first base. I mean, LeMahieu's been a mess. Gleyber Torres, great player, by the way. Andahar, another player that you're excited about. But for whatever reason, you got this mediocre matchup this weekend, Yankees and Phillies. I will say this, all right? I will say this. The Phillies and the Yankees, one spends $202 million. The other one spends $183. Will one of them make the playoffs? Which has a better shot? I should say, I'll ask you this. Right? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. So we got that. It's funny because Phillies and Yankees, and you get this matchup every once in a while. They're playing this 2-game set, and it should be different. It should feel a little different. I'm interested to see what the ballpark's like. We know Friday night, not Friday night. When the Phillies were home this week, tonight's Friday night. When the Phillies were home this week, how about that? You're the Phillies. You get the Yankees in town, and they don't give you a Friday night game. Aren't you saying to the commish, hey, can we play a third game against this team? We haven't had a gate in over a year. Can we get an extra gate against the Yankees? But the Phillies and the Yankees, they match up. One's 6 games out of first place. The other one's 3.5 games out of first place. I honestly, not that the wild card is really now. What's the wild card situation? Are they going back to how are they doing the playoffs this year? Did they change it? Because last year it was. Is it the 2 wild card teams this year? They're going back to the top 2, right? Okay, so because last year they did what? They did an expanded playoffs, but they did not keep that. Not this year. Okay. So the Yankees right now are 2.5 games out of the wild card. Boston's number 1, Houston's 2, Cleveland's 3, New York's 4. Philadelphia's 5.5 out of the wild card. They are closer to their division than they are the wild card. So who's got a better shot to make the playoffs? 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. That's the text message. And by the way, just got some news here. The South Jersey Group 3 championship game, Ocean City and Mainland, has been postponed, and it will be played tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. That just came in just 2 minutes ago. Apparently wet conditions over in Linwood. So that game will be tomorrow at 11 a.m. All right? So I know a lot of people have been asking me, how many people are asking, are you doing the game today? You doing the game today? I was not calling the game today, but I guess now that the game's tomorrow, I probably will get an opportunity to do that game. I just got a couple text messages here, and But I want to ask you guys out there, and I know the Sixers play tonight. We got a lot of Sixers we're going to get into, which obviously this big game 3 tonight has so much, I think, really riding on this series tonight. And I want to get to that in my next segment. But, I was just having on Fridays, I have lunch with my father or talking about the Sixers. And as we're leaving, I said, what I really like to see is the Sixers make a deep playoff run. If they win the championship, obviously cherry on top, whipped cream, all that stuff. I'd love to see the Sixers win an NBA title. It doesn't ruin my life if they don't. I would love to see it. I've been a big proponent of the process. I've been a big proponent of what this organization did. I feel like they reinvigorated the fan base. That's obvious. Anybody who hated the process, you might not have liked what they did, but I think you can take a step back now and say, look, you love this team and are more into this team now than you've probably ever been in your life. And I said, all I want them to do, at the worst case scenario, if they don't win a title, get me right up into Eagles. Like, when I do this job, this is my job, so I'm looking at those peripherals here. Get me to Eagles training camp. So the Sixers, because sadly, Dad, this Phillies team ain't doing it. I hope I'm wrong. 609-403-0973. Text board is open. If you're watching the show live, you can hit us up on the stream over at 97.3 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Jeff says, facts on the Dodgers. We spent a lot. The Dodgers spend the most money, but you know why? They have the best team. They won the World Series, and they added to it. They went out and got Trevor Bauer. They went out and added more pieces. They win a World Series. They said that's not enough. They got to keep going. The Phillies this offseason was so weird that they were not going to spend. They weren't going to spend. And then all of a sudden, JT Realmuto, no one's signing him. Nobody's, giving him an offer. So the Phillies kind of get back into the JT Realmuto game. They go and sign him. And, the next thing you know, this team has got Harper and Realmuto and Hoskins. And, Alec Boehm had a really strong year last year in half of a 60-game season. And you felt like a full season of him. And James Segura is a professional hitter and all that stuff. But it just, for whatever reason, it hasn't worked out so far. Why? Why is it not working out? We said if the Phillies bullpen was they were historically bad last year. If they were just marginally better, would that be good enough? So Bob Wankle today at 3:40 will talk about it with us here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I'm like ready to go for this game tonight. This game tonight I'm ready for. Sixers and Hawks. We're going to get into it coming up. Bob at 3:40, Paul at 3:20. Busy show today. Sean Kelly, is he calling the game for ESPN Radio? So Sean Kelly is calling the game nationally for ESPN Radio tonight. We will have the local call from Tom McGinnis. Sean Kelly is calling the game nationally. So we'll get a national perspective from Sean at 4:40. We'll get the local perspective from Paul at 3:20 and so much more. Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Don't forget, watch the show live, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Search 973 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Hill. We have Sixers and Hawks tonight right here on 97.3 ESPN. Tom McGinnis on the call. Coverage starts at 7:30. We got you covered from all the different angles. Mike McGarry in about 15 minutes from now from the press of Atlantic City will join us. And that mainland Ocean City game, by the way, as we mentioned, has been postponed to tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. in Linwood. All right, so what are some of the biggest surprises in this matchup so far for me? As we kind of break this down, we look at this thing and we say, all right, what has surprised us the most so far through two games? And what we're not surprised about, but maybe we should be, I'm not surprised about Joel Embiid. Look, I get it. The guy's playing on a torn meniscus. But this is Joel Embiid. This is who he is. This is the guy that I said all year that is probably the most valuable player. And I said over and over that, can he be the best player on the best team to win the championship? I think he can be. I don't know if it's going to be this year, but I think a team can win a championship because Joel Embiid's the best player. He is averaging 39.5 points, 11 rebounds, and 2 blocks. And the Atlanta Hawks, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Brooklyn Nets, the Phoenix Suns, the Denver Nuggets, and the LA Clippers really have nobody that can stop him. Utah, maybe. I mean, Gobert could give them some issues if they make the finals. There's not a player on a team that's left other than maybe Utah that has a guy that can slow him down. So don't anticipate that 39 points per game taking much of a dip. Yeah, it might go down. He might score 29 or he might score 33. He will continue to produce. Atlanta has no answer. So how good Embiid has been really shouldn't be all that surprising. I shouldn't say that. The fact that Embiid has been able to play on this knee should be surprising. But the fact that he's playing as well as he is should not be. Because quite frankly, if you look at Joel Embiid, what does he do? He's got a lot of perimeter game. People get your butt on the block. That's not what he does. And that's not what he's doing. How is Joel Embiid doing work? Yeah, he's done a lot of inside the paint scoring, but the Sixers are still giving him the ball at the three-point line. The Sixers are still giving him the ball at the foul line. They're still giving him the ball at the elbow. This guy's not like featured down on the left block. Used to hear people, get your butt down in the paint. No, Joel, don't get your butt down in the paint. Be Joel Embiid. Don't listen to these clowns who want you to get your butt down on the block. No, please don't do that. Be Joel Embiid. Because the other guy, he's a guy that other teams can figure out how to defend. If you're going to put him in the block and just stick him down there, eventually teams will say, they're just going down to the block every single time. But if you're Joel Embiid, that's a different story. Because I don't know how you're going to defend. I don't know how to defend him because I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know if he's going to pull up from the baseline. I don't know if he's going to reverse spin towards the paint. I don't know if he's going to fade away from the foul line. I don't know if he's going to up and under me. I don't know if he's going to try to blow past me from the three-point line. I don't know if he's going to shoot a three-point shot. So it's one of those things that I don't want to see Joel Embiid change his game, and I don't think he will. I don't think you have to worry about that at all. So am I surprised that Embiid has been this effective? Not really. I know the whole knee thing, but look, the Sixers are the Sixers. And what do I mean by that? The Sixers have been so overly cautious with injuries. Do we now think they have stripped that from their mindset and decided to be irresponsible with the biggest piece they have? No. So the fact that Joel Embiid is out there, I don't think the Sixers are putting a guy out there that has the potential for long-term injury. That's just my opinion. Look, he might injure the knee, that he needs surgery or something. You get meniscus surgery. I'm not downplaying meniscus surgery, but it's not like major reconstructive knee surgery. He might get to a point where he can't handle, the pain. And it's not a pain that is debilitating to it's going to ruin your career, right? I mean, I wouldn't think that. I don't want to be the guy that says, hey, I've had meniscus injury, but I have. I never got surgery on it, and it still hurts. Some days it hurts, some days it doesn't. So I'm not comparing, all these people. Well, I had this injury when I was in high school. I tore my meniscus. I never got it fixed, and it sucks, to be honest with you. It hurts some days. Other days, like today, it's raining out. It's bothering me, whatever. But it didn't ever make me have to say, nobody, like, it's all up. I don't think he's going to get major reconstructive knee surgery because he has a torn meniscus, is my point. He might injure it to the point where he can't play or that he re-injures himself, but I don't think he's going to shred his ACL, his PCL, and, do major long-term damage. That's my point. Like, the Sixers have been so overly cautious with him and other injuries, so I'm not surprised that they have played Joel Embiid in this series. And because they're playing Joel Embiid, I think they understand he's not going to further injure himself, and if he does, it's not going to be something that is going to threaten his career. So with that, I'm not surprised that Embiid has been this dominant. So number one, what's the biggest surprise? I would say the biggest surprise to me in terms of Atlanta, and that's not really a surprise to me because I thought this was a deep Atlanta team in terms of shooters, with Kevin Huerter and with Bogdanovich. Now losing DeAndre Hunter hurt them a little bit. But what I think has been a surprise to me about this Atlanta team is the way that they move the ball and make that extra pass, and that the moment hasn't seemed too big for them. And it shouldn't be much of a surprise because they went into Madison Square Garden and played well against the Knicks. But it still is to some extent because, look, the pressure gets turned up after each round. And quite frankly, the Knicks team wasn't all that good. The margin for error was greater against the Knicks because if you're not shooting well, the Knicks aren't shooting themselves back into a game. So I'm a little surprised at how the Hawks have handled, I don't want to say the pressure, but for the most part that they've handled the moment. That is one of the bigger, because I don't think there's a surprise like, well, this guy's a lot better than I thought. No, I thought Kevin Huerter could shoot. I think that Bogdanovich can shoot. So that's not surprising me. I know Trae Young can play. So none of that is surprising to me. What's surprising to me a little bit is that Atlanta is not letting the moment get to them all that much. Because quite frankly, it's a young team. It's a team that doesn't have a lot of experience in the playoffs. I mean, I guess of the players on their team that have the most playoff experience is probably Capella. And I don't want to say he's been the biggest non-factor, but of their starting players, he's had the least impact. Yet the biggest impact from like John Collins, Bogdanovich, Huerter off the bench. Gallinari played a nice game in game 2. But they don't have a lot of playoff experience, this crew. So the biggest surprise for me is how they have handled the moment. That the moment has not been too big for them. What about you guys? 609-403-0973, 609-403-0973. Keep the messages coming on the stream. I see them over there. Let me read a couple. Maka is watching on YouTube. Says Sixers tonight pivotal. Atlanta confident. Sixers beatable on the road. Winning tonight will say a lot about if we are ready to win it all. It's a good point there, Ma. Atlanta's a good home team. I think 25-11 this year. But if the Sixers go in there and win, we'll see if that confidence from Atlanta drops a little bit. All right, Sports Bash is live on 97.3 ESPN. Free mobile app. Watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Search 973 ESPN. We're brought to you by Matt Blatt Nissan, the all-new Matt Blatt Nissan. Open, Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot. When we come back, my guy Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, his thoughts on Game 3. Plus, we'll get you information on that mainland Ocean City game. It will now be tomorrow. And people out there listening, a lot of times, you guys listen for Sixers and Phillies and Flyers and Eagles. And this might be the biggest high school baseball game in our area, maybe ever. I'll ask Mike about that. Stick around. All right, Sports Pass Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And, of course, you can watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. He joins us each of those days at this time as we kind of talk a little bit about everything. You can check out Mike's must-win column, which is a really good one this week. And I mentioned before the break, and Mike will talk a little bit more about this because the news just came out that the game between Mainland and and Ocean City, Holy Spirit played on Thursday and won their sectional championship. But this game between Ocean City and Mainland has been postponed to 11 o'clock Saturday morning. And Mike, you wrote about it, but it's really, I don't know, you could probably speak more. You cover baseball for, my God, a long, long time. This is maybe one of the biggest public school baseball games maybe in this area ever.
Yeah, absolutely. You have two teams contending for sectional championships for a South Jersey championship. And the point of my column today was when I first started back in the 90s, which to me seems like yesterday, but when you count back the years, this is a long time. Baseball was kind of an afterthought in our area, right? I mean, teams, not that there weren't any good teams, there were good teams, there were good players, but when it came to other sports, baseball ran second. And I used to ask coaches, well, where are all the good baseball players? And they'd say on the boardwalk or lifeguarding or surfing. And that's changed in the last 10 years, and it's kind of culminated this season with what has really been an excellent baseball season. We had St. Augustine and Holy Spirit win South Jersey titles yesterday, and now we've got, Mainland and Ocean City battling for the South Jersey Group 3 title tomorrow, 11 a.m. at Mainland. So, it really, it was hyped as a remarkable baseball season, and it has lived up to it so far.
Yeah, I know that a lot of people kind of look at that line of demarcation, Mike. When did baseball go from the spring sport to, hey, guys are getting drafted, guys are playing Division I, guys are going to, the next level? Like you see routine. I mean, Ocean City is going to roll 4 Division I pitchers out at you, that roster over there. I mean, you've got Division I players littered on some of these rosters. You'd be lucky if you had one in the entire league. As far as how long ago?
10, 15 years ago. I think in the 90s, you're right. If you had one Division I player, it was remarkable. If you had a team get to a South Jersey final, it was cause for celebration. I mean, you look at I think the state baseball playoffs began in 1971. And I want to say between 71 and I want to say like 2010, I think Bridgeton in 1976 was the only public school team from the Cape Atlantic League to get to a state final. So that's remarkable when you think about it. And if you go back and trace the resurgence, it goes back to, hey, I mean, Mike Trout at Millville, right? I don't know, I don't know if it's specifically him, but, he gets drafted in 2009, and that's, you can kind of circle that date on the calendar and go from there and see, from that point on, Cape Atlantic League Baseball has been a different entity. And there's a lot of factors. You have year-round facilities now. You have kids playing year-round. And of course, nothing succeeds like success. I said, at Mainland, one of the neat things at Mainland now is, and you've been over there, there's a ton of little kids running around, watching the games, getting Chase Petty's autograph. And they all want to be a part of that, playing in a big game like that, 4 or 5 years from now when they're in high school. So it's really rolling right now, and, let's hope it keeps going.
Yeah, it's and this game, has some uniqueness to it anyway between Ocean City and Mainland. If they play, it's a rivalry anyway. But, between the two teams, how many Division I prospects and players, and, of course, drafted prospects, but many of these guys grew up actually playing together. I mean, it's like when I broadcast a game, I coached almost every single one of these two guys on both of these teams. So there's just a ton of talent, and they all played together on the Atlantic Shore teams and whatever travel teams they play for. So that adds to the uniqueness of tomorrow's game, or Saturday 11 o'clock's game.
Right. It's a throwback, right? And what makes high school sports great is the neighborhood rivalries that we kind of all grew up with. No matter where you grew up with, your high school had a high school down the street that it was big rivals with, and that's Mainland and Ocean City. And it really is a friendly rivalry. The Mainland coach, Billy Kern, and the Ocean City coach, Andrew Bristol, are good friends. They called each other after they won in the semifinals the other night. The players all know each other. And like you said, there's a lot of players on both teams. You have Chase Petty, University of Florida commit, MLB draft prospect on mainland. You've got guys like Gannon Brady, Fordham recruit, Tom Finnegan, Vanderbilt recruit, Matt Noonan, Boston College recruit on Ocean City. And you got a lot of guys who seem like they've been in high school forever, right? I mean, these Ocean City kids seem like they've been around forever. Chase Petty seems like he's been around forever. So it really has all the elements that you need to have a great game going into it tomorrow.
All right, so kind of give us a couple of thoughts. I mean, obviously, Mainland gets a lot of headlines because of Petty, but Ocean City has 4 Division I pitchers on that team. They can pick them out of a hat and compete in this game if they want to. Kind of give us a quick little preview. I think I would imagine Petty's not available tomorrow to throw for Mainland, so they'll probably go with Mark Elliott, I would imagine, who's a lefty. But Ocean City's got any choice of 4 guys. I guess Finnegan's not available, but that doesn't really matter for them.
Yeah, I mean, it's you're absolutely right. Chase Petty not available. I agree with you. Probably go with Elliott. Ocean City has, Gannon Brady and Noonan available. Brady last time out threw a 1-hitter in a win over Lacey Township, 3-0. I think, it's high school baseball. It's a rivalry game. It sounds simple, but it's going to come down to the team that executes and makes the less mistakes. I know it sounds like coach speak there, but that's what it is. And, here's another thing I'll say about high school baseball. I hear everywhere I go, or you turn on sports radio and you hear fans say, "Oh, I can't watch, the Phillies anymore. I can't watch the major leagues anymore because it's so boring. It's just strikeouts and home runs and walks, the 3-2 outcomes, and the game takes 4 hours." Well, I would tell everybody, go to a high school baseball game. Go to this game tomorrow at 11 a.m. You're going to see baseball the way it was played in the 80s, the 70s, and the 60s. You're going to see bunting. You're going to see, hit and runs. You're going to see, a fast-moving game. It really is a remarkable game when 2 high school baseball teams play, and it's almost the antithesis of what we're seeing on the major league level right now. So if you're sitting at home and you're complaining about Major League Baseball, you're tired of the strikeouts, tired of the home runs, tired of launch angles, come out to Mainland tomorrow and see baseball the way it was kind of meant to be played, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
Saturday, 11 o'clock.
Small ball.
Yeah, Saturday, 11 o'clock is the time for the game. The winner will be the Group 3 champion. And it's funny because people who are not from the area, that are just, hey, are you going to that game? Are you calling that game? What about that game? I mean, this game has that kind of buzz around it. And it's funny because, Ocean City and Mainland for that matter, these are 2 teams really built on pitching. I think Ocean City won 3-0 one game, and Mainland's won by 1 run in both of their games. They had to come from behind against Triton the other day to get to this spot. They won a game in the 11th inning against Apsagami. So pitching, defense, bunts, you mentioned it, Mike. It should be a great atmosphere, 11 o'clock at Mainland in Linwood. If you don't get a chance to get out there, you can check it out. There'll be live video of the game streaming. You can search for that. I'll be calling that game tomorrow at 11 o'clock. All right, Mike, let's get into tonight's game number 3. And we touched on some things on Wednesday, but Atlanta's at home here. And I said before you jumped on, the one thing that's kind of surprised me about them is that I know they beat the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, but and I know that Knicks team, they're a little short on talent. I'm a little surprised that the moment hasn't seemed too big for them in any of these games yet.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially in game 2. What really impressed me about the Hawks, and we talked a little bit about the other day, if there was ever a time for them to say, this moment's too big, see you later, it was game 2, right? The Sixers come out like a ball of fire. They go up 18 points in the first quarter. The Hawks could have easily said, well, we got game 1. We got what we came for here. We got our split. Let's just fold up tents and meekly walk back. And, we'll lose this game and we'll regroup and play Friday in Atlanta. They didn't do that. They stuck in the game. They battled back. They grinded back, and they actually took a lead in the third quarter. That really showed me a lot for the Hawks and showed me that, they're not a group that's going to be intimidated by much. And, they do have some experience on that group. Lou Williams has been in playoff games. Clint Capella has been in some playoff games. Gallinari has been in some playoff games. So while they do have a lot of young players, they do have some, experienced veterans that, they can rely on in those situations. And Gallinari was huge in game 2 for them.
Yeah, and, some people would say, what's the biggest surprise? Well, that it's Embiid. I'm not so surprised that Embiid's playing as well as he's playing, I guess, with the injury. But the thing I want to ask you, Mike, is this, whatever the team say about injuries, but the Sixers, they're overly cautious with injuries. So the fact that he's playing, does that suggest that maybe this injury is not as bad as, DeAndre Hunter's out with the same injury?
Yeah, 2 things about Embiid. First of all, I think I don't know if he's getting enough attention for how well he's played, and he's getting plenty of attention, but he's, this is almost Wilt Chamberlain-like, 40 points a game. It's really unbelievable. And when it comes to the injury, any questions I had about Joel Embiid's injury or how serious he was hurt were answered when I saw Joel Embiid walk out of a tunnel before game 1, holding a sledgehammer with Triple H next to him. I saw Embiid gyrate around the court, DXing it up with Triple H. If Embiid was so hurt, if every step he took threatened to be his last, I can't imagine the Sixers letting him pull that stunt before game 1. So at that point, nobody can say anything to me about Joel Embiid's health again, because he's healthy with what I saw him do with Triple H before game 1.
I said the same thing. I don't think the team, if they were all that concerned, would have him out there doing the DX chop all over the court before the game even started. That kind of told me, all right, he seems to be ready to go. He is listed as questionable. I would imagine he would play, although, he did have 2 days to kind of rest this thing. But in that 2 days, it could, kind of lock back up or get swollen. But that kind of tells me I think he's okay. On the other side, DeAndre Hunter's out. He's done for the season with the meniscus injury. And you just wonder, do you look at tonight, Mike, and say this is the tea leaf reader right here? We're going to find out which way this series is going. Or like if Atlanta wins tonight, as long as Philly wins game 4, like is tonight, where do you put this on you have your must win column. Is this a must win for either side?
Well, I think it's not a must win for either side, but I think whoever, well, let me amend this. Let me say this. I think it's a must win for Atlanta. I think for Atlanta to win the series, they have to win tonight. I don't think, if they're, it's 2-2 going back to Philadelphia, if they win game 4, I don't think it's the same. I think Atlanta, if they want to win the series, come out and win tonight at home, go up 2-1, put all the pressure on the 76ers. I think as long as the 76ers go back to Philadelphia 2-2, they're in good shape. But I just think psychologically, I think Atlanta has to win tonight, and go up 2-1 in this series to really win the series.
All right, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. There you go on that. Let me get you real quick. I know you wrote about the breaking news today. People have been asking for a public football state championship, and some news has come down on that today.
Yeah, absolutely. The state high schools have approved it, and so starting in 2022, which is obviously not this season, but next season, we will have true public school state champions. So we will have state championship games. Currently the public school football playoffs stop at the semifinal level. It's been an ongoing saga for years. New Jersey has just played the sectional champs for years. They added the regional championship games, which are in essence state semifinals a few years ago. But we will finally join the rest of the civilized world. New Jersey high school football will take a big step forward into the 21st century. And for the first time in 90 years, starting in 2022, we will have true public school football state champions in high school. And I can only imagine what it would be like if we had a team from our area get on a run through the football playoffs and say play a North Jersey Power for a state championship at MetLife Arena Stadium or Rutgers. So New Jersey has finally kind of entered the 21st century and joined the rest of the country.
Mike, I got about a minute, but what is anything changing with the schedule because of that? You're still going to have your Thanksgiving rivalry, so your Millville Vineland fans, your Holy Spirit Atlantic City fans can rest easy. The Thanksgiving rivalries will not change. The season's going to start around Labor Day. It's going to end the first or second weekend in December. You're just going to have that extra round of playoffs. So
No real change as far as the schedule goes. Thanksgiving games are still there, much to my chagrin. That's a topic for another day. But we're going to have state championship games starting in 2022, and we're going to have Thanksgiving games too.
All right, Mike McGarry, Press of Atlantic City. He'll be back on Monday, and he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Mike, Saturday, 11 o'clock. I will see you, pal.
All right, I'll see you there. Thanks, Mike.
All right, there he goes, Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City. We appreciate him as always. It's been a fun segment having Mike on. We get to spin it around. He covers it all: baseball, Phillies, high school, Sixers, football, Eagles, all of it. And fun segment. I'm glad we set this up with Mike. Coming up, the 76ers have their big Game 3 tonight. He said he thinks the Hawks have to win tonight. Do you guys agree with that? I got text messages. I got StreamYard comments. I'm going to get to them all. 609-403-0973. I'll open up the phones. I got an open segment here. If you want to jump on, I will do that. 609-573-3776 in South Jersey, and in Delaware, 609-573-ESPN. 609-573-3776, 609-573-ESPN, all over our 8 counties in South Jersey and in Delaware. All right, hour 2 of the show. Hope you're enjoying your day. It's a little wet out there, a little overcasty. Not supposed to be the best weekend, but let's make the most of it with a Sixer win tonight. I'll tell you how it could happen. Paul Hudrick at 3:20. Bob Wankle will talk a little Phillies and Yanks coming up at 3:40 today. The Sports Batch is live on 97.3 ESPN. Eagles have signed Richard Rodgers, by the way, as they have added to the tight end room. This is kind of a move that we all thought was going to happen. Jeff Kerr will join us at 5:25 tonight to kind of break it down with us. This is a smart move. They needed it. You know, Richard Rodgers is a guy that, look, he's been pretty good, honestly. He was one of their better receivers last year. And he kind of fits the bill of a guy that, veteran, blocks, catches passes, knows – I don't want to say knows the offense, quite frankly, because we don't know what this offense – but he knows the offensive personnel, I guess you could say, on this team. He knows Dallas Goedert. He knows the quarterback situation here. So Richard Rodgers – and look, no move the Eagles make is a Super Bowl winning move. But is it a playoff move? This will be Rodgers' 4th year here, by the way. He had 24 catches, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns last year, 29 years old. He's a guy that, it's another move that says we think we can make the playoff. That's what it tells me. Why do I think that? You could just stick with Jack Stoll or go with Hakeem Butler, a young, develop a tight end. The Eagles are going with a 29-year-old veteran. There was an article that I read, I think it was at Sports Illustrated, that said 6 teams that, didn't make the playoffs that have the best shot at making the playoffs. 2 teams were in the NFC East, right? And I'm thinking, all right, this is got to be interesting. It's probably Dallas, right? Dallas is a team that I think most people think can make the playoff. They're getting back Dak Prescott. The injuries on that team really hurt them last year. But the other team was the New York Giants. And I like the Giants, what they've done to their roster. What I don't like the Giants and what they've done is at quarterback. And I'll tell you why. I was reading an article from Doug Farrar over at USA Today. He's an NFL writer. And he did this breakdown of all the different quarterbacks and the worst throws that he saw for every single quarterback. He did the best throws. He did the worst throws. By the way, Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts made this list a lot. But another guy who made this list was Daniel Jones. So adding Richard Rodgers, no, it's not a Super Bowl move. But it's another message to me that the Eagles think they can make the playoffs. And why do I say that? Because if you don't think you're a playoff team, you don't need to sign a 29-year-old Richard Rodgers. You've got young tight ends on your team already. You could just let them get development. We're not going to be all that good this year. Let's see what, Hakeem Butler can do. We're not going to be all that good this year. Let's take a look at Jack Stoll. But the Eagles' message is, I think we have a shot. And they're not wrong. They're not wrong at all. But when I looked at this list, okay, it's the worst throws in the NFL. So they listed it like this: 0 to 1 step drop. In other words, you took the shotgun snap and you just basically turned your feet, right, Josh? I mean, sorry. I didn't mean to address you singularly, but you can get into the conversation if you want. This is mechanical stuff that you might like. This is the worst throw in the league from every quarterback on 0 to 1 step drops. In other words, you took the shotgun snap and you just turned your feet. You didn't really do anything else. According to his research, watching the film, Carson Wentz is the worst thrower in the league when it comes to 0 and 1 step drops. All right. And he writes that this is pretty interesting. Shorter throws from short drops are supposed to be easier concepts to get a quarterback into rhythm, but it wasn't the case for Wentz, who was by far the NFL's least efficient passer on throws with dropbacks of 0 or 1 step. On such throws, 157, he completed 90 of 145 for 784 yards, 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a rating of 68.9. The next worst guy was Drew Lock, and his rating was 75.6. Wentz wasn't the worst. He was by far the worst. All right, the 3-step drop, the worst passer in the league on 3-step. Under center, 1, 2, 3, get it out. Drew Lock, Denver Broncos. 5-step drop, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, throw it down the field. Cam Newton, New England Patriots. Not much of a surprise. Newton cannot throw the ball down the field any longer. 7-step drop. Now, this is kind of old school, the old 7-step drop. You're in the shotgun and you're taking a couple of steps back. Worst passer in the league last year was Matt Ryan on the 7-step drop. You don't see a whole heck of a lot of 7-step. He only did it 54 times last year. The designed rollout, worst passer in the league, is Daniel Jones. All right? You're going to start to hear a pattern here. The RPO, worst passer in the league, Daniel Jones. So I go back to the article. Which 6 teams that did not make the playoffs last year have the best shot? The article said Dallas and the Giants were 2 of the 6. I like what the Giants have done to their roster. They've got the worst quarterback. Pre-snap motion, worst passer in the league, Jared Goff. A little surprised by that. Without pre-snap motion, worst passer in the league, Carson Wentz. Now, it says this is weird because Wentz was actually pretty good with pre-snap motion. He was the worst with no motion. The worst play-action passer in the league. Take a guess. Is it Jones or Wentz? Carson Wentz was the worst on play action in football last year. Without play action, Drew Lock is the worst. When blitzed, Drew Lock is the worst. Without the blitz, Eagles quarterbacks in general. So he basically clumped Hurts in with Wentz because they were both that bad. That's a problem. Now, he said with Hurts, he was 55 of 110 for 778 yards, 2 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a passer rating of 64. Him and Wentz had the 2 worst ratings when it came to passing the football without the blitz. Now, under pressure, Drew Lock. Without pressure, the worst in the league, Wentz and Hurts. They were the 2 worst last year. This is not encouraging. Now, Hurts had a rating of 85 without pressure, which was about the same that Wentz had, 85.3. Hurts was 85.1. In the pocket, the worst quarterbacks in the league, Eagles quarterbacks in general, Wentz and Hurts. Oh, man. Outside the pocket, Sam Darnold. All right, that's your list right there. So they were the worst quarterbacks on all of those different types of throws last year. So this isn't to rain on the Wentz-Hurts parade, who obviously, as a combination last year, they were not very good. But what it was is more of an example of that Daniel Jones, the conversation started with Richard Rodgers isn't a move that makes you win the Super Bowl. But what it does tell me anyway is that the Eagles think that they have a shot to win the division. That's the message to me. Again, I don't have to sign Richard Rodgers. He's a 29-year-old veteran. I don't need a 29-year-old veteran if I think my team stinks. But why am I bringing Richard Rodgers in? Because I think I have a shot. And that's the message to me. 609-403-0973. 609-403-0973. It is the Sports Bash live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. You know, the Hurts stuff, I'm not even really taking much into consideration. I'm not glossing over it like, he played 4 games. He played 4 games with an offensive line that was an absolute disaster. Did he look great? No, he did not, by the way. I thought Hurts looked average. If you ask me, give me the full sample size, he was average. He showed flashes of brilliance. He showed flashes of poor play. but he wasn't overall poor. He wasn't overall great. He was average. Can he get better than that? I think so. I thought it was encouraging to see a guy who, quite frankly, let's be honest, Jalen Hurts was in a crappy situation. He's in a spot where he gets drafted in the second round and nobody wanted him. Fans, anyway. He's in a spot where he gets drafted in the second round and he's playing behind a franchise quarterback. And he's got to be thinking, why the hell did they draft me? And then everybody's saying he's going to be used in a Taysom Hill way. Well, halfway through the season, he's not used at all. And then we hear this report that the owner says, go ahead and play him if you want. And the coach doesn't play him. And then finally, the other guy's so bad that they say at halftime at Lambeau Field against Aaron Rodgers, hey, bud, why don't you get out there and show us what you got? And he almost brought you back. And then he's got to go through the whole, well, is he going to play? Is he not going to play? And Doug Peterson doesn't announce that he's the starter when it was clear that he was going to play the rest of the season. So I don't think that Jalen Hurts was put into the greatest possibility to succeed. And yet I thought he overcame it pretty well. I thought he did a pretty good job considering all of the nonsense that this team kind of had going around him. And who knows how Carson Wentz and his relationship were. I've talked to a lot of people about that, and you got to keep in mind, with the COVID situation, they were doing stuff on Zoom. They weren't in the quarterback rooms, like, they weren't doing all the stuff together. So who knows what kind of relationship those guys had. All I know is this. I thought for the situation that he was put in, Jalen Hurts last year, I am more intrigued than I am, oh my God, they're playing this guy. This is what we're stuck with. I mean, you can honestly be like, oh my God, you had Carson Wentz. You had a franchise quarterback, and this is what happened? And this is what we're stuck with now? No, I'm actually saying I think this kid is a breath of fresh air. And I'm not like I hate Carson Wentz. Look, I was a big Wentz fan. I love Wentz, man. I thought he was great. 2017, even when people didn't think he was as good in 18 and 19. I said, dude, he's throwing to nobody in 19. Greg Ward and Josh Perkins and God knows who else out there, and he drags that team to the playoffs. But I can't defend what he did last year. Look, some people take a stance and a side on a sports conversation, and I don't understand this. And they just dig their heels in because that's where they started and they can't get out. You're allowed to say, I was incorrect, and now I've changed my opinion on things. Wentz is one of them. I'm not saying I was incorrect, but he regressed, and it's okay to say that. He regressed. It's okay to say that. Kyle says, I was never a Wentz guy, just being honest. All right, well, that's fine. I don't understand. I don't know what he did in his past that would make people not like the guy. He took this team to the number 1 seed. He was a highlight reel player, but he was also a player who made plays with his arm, his legs. He did it by basically, I mean, look, they didn't have great talent at wide receiver. He won with Torrey Smith, Nelson Aguilar, and Alshon Jeffrey. They were solid players. It was just a good mix. We'll have football at 4 with Andrew DiCecco. What does the signing of Richard Rodgers kind of indicate to him? We'll ask him coming up at football at 4 today, plus Jeff Kerr at 5:25 today from CBS Sports. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. All right, the Sixers have a big one tonight. What are some of the key matchups? And what should we be looking for differently in Atlanta than we saw in Philadelphia? We'll ask our Sixers insider, Paul Hudrick, when he joins us next on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. And don't forget, watch the show live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Search 973 ESPN. All right, 20 after 3. It's time for Inside the Sixers as they take on the Atlanta Hawks tonight, Game 3. The coverage begins at 7:30. Tom McGinnis has the call, but something tells me the tip-off probably won't start until somewhere around 8 o'clock. That's the way they kind of do these things. By the way, they have announced that Game 5 in Philly will be at 8:30 on Wednesday night. I do not know what time the game on Monday would be. That would be nice for my traffic department, but I digress. Let's bring Paul Hudrick in from inside from 97.3 ESPN.com. Maybe he knows what time Game 4 will be on Monday night. Do you have any clue?
I don't. I would imagine 7:30.
But I also Game 5 out and not the Game 4.
Well, I want to point out. So I believe Game 4, that 8:30 start is only if Utah sweeps the Clippers. If there is a Game 5 for that series, the Sixers would be at 7:30. So go Clippers.
Okay, all right. So that game would be in Philly at 8:30.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, Game 5 Wednesday night. Now, I saw somebody from the Sixers, Laura Rosen, tweet today the game was 8:30, but I guess she didn't put a little asterisk.
She actually had a caveat. She did comment on that and said that it was contingent on Clippers and Jazz.
I said, what's the biggest surprise in this series to you so far? I'll give you my answer. Let me hear what yours is.
Biggest surprise. I mean, part of me wants to say Joel Embiid kind of doing this all on one leg, because that's pretty crazy to me. But at the same time, nothing really surprises me with him. I guess I'm a little surprised in the way that Doc has used his bench. I mean, I probably shouldn't be, but I'm a little surprised he hasn't shortened it to just 9 guys. I guess in a weird way, he's kind of done that because of the way he's implemented things, but I'm surprised that he's still allowing all 11 guys to play. I thought he would have tightened things up a little bit at this point, especially after they lost Game 1. And I guess the fact that they lost Game 1, quite frankly, I really thought they'd be up 2-0 going into Atlanta. So I am also pretty surprised that they're down, that they're tied 1-1. And as you can see, basically since that first quarter where Atlanta punched them in the mouth in Game 1, they've been the better team really in every quarter since.
Yeah, and that's interesting. The fact that he hasn't shortened it. I guess that is somewhat of a surprise that I didn't kind of go down that path. For me, Paul, I know the Hawks played at Madison Square Garden, but the Knicks aren't that good. Let's be honest; it's just not a talented team. They were scrappy and a nice bunch. But the fact that this moment doesn't seem too big for a team that really doesn't have a lot of playoff experience, that's the biggest surprise to me. And now they're going home. I'm really intrigued to see if they bring it up another level.
Yeah, when you look at certain guys, I mean, Bogdanovich is a guy has played in a ton of big games overseas. He hasn't played in them here, but he's played a ton in overseas. Gallinari's played in a ton of big games. Lou Williams. I mean, they have guys that have been around. Even Capella. When Capella was in Houston, he played in some pretty big games. So, maybe a guy like Trae Young or a guy like John Collins doesn't have that kind of playoff resume, but there are guys on this roster that do, and I think that's part of it. And then another part of it is credit to Trae Young. I mean, he just has that personality to him where really it doesn't seem like it. Not only does it not seem like it bothers him, it seems like he almost enjoys it. You talked about him playing at Madison Square Garden. He loves that villain role. And if I were Sixers fans, I would just quit that Trae as balding chant because, one, I think it's sort of lame, and two, I think he feeds it. I think it feeds him. I think he loves it. So it's partially, I think, a mix of their veterans having that influence, and then a young guy like Trae who just has that bravado and that confidence to him. That I don't think this moment phases him in one bit.
You mentioned, you're right, Lou Williams, but a lot of those guys have played in moments overseas, as you kind of hinted at, but they're younger players who they rely on. John Collins is one of their better players, and of course Trae Young. It just seems that that is the interesting part about this series. It's like we're almost waiting to see if Atlanta kind of wilts here, and I didn't feel that they were going to in either of the 2 games of Philly, which kind of says to our listeners, you shouldn't expect them to kind of fold when they go back home. They should only play better. Now, I've mentioned a couple of times, Paul, the Hawks needed to hit 23s to beat the Sixers. They shot in Game 2 about what their average is from 3. They cannot be average, right? They've got to be better than their average to beat this team. So do you anticipate them, when we talk about making the adjustments, finding more ways to get more threes up? They took like 20 less threes in Game 2 than they did in Game 3.
Yeah, and like the one adjustment that I wouldn't be surprised if it comes. I don't know if it's necessarily a game 3 adjustment, but you might want to consider putting Kevin Herter in the starting lineup and either not playing Solomon Hill at all or bringing him off the bench, because Kevin Herter through 2 games has been outstanding. Now, to your point, is the other shoe going to drop on him, because he's something like 15 of 19, which he's not Wilt Chamberlain. So at some point, there's going to be a little bit of regression there. And I guess the other thing is too, they had to do something to get John Collins going. I mean, he's a really good player. He's been a really good player for them. He's a guy looking for a big payday, and he kind of, the first 2 games, quite frankly, he's been pretty invisible. So I think that's one of the big things. I think they need to find some way to get Collins going, whether that's maybe going small. I mean, that could be one adjustment I can see them making, is when Doc Rivers goes to Dwight Howard, play small and put John Collins as your 5, run Trae Young and John Collins pick and rolls, and force Dwight Howard into some tough situations. Now, the Sixers have a good counter in that they could just put Ben Simmons at the 5, and that can mitigate a lot of that. But I think that's one way McMillan can kind of force Doc Rivers' hand into doing some things maybe he doesn't want to do. So I think those are the couple of the big things. Just lineup stuff, I think they could definitely make some adjustments. But yeah, I clearly optimizing 3-point shots is huge. And it's what they've, yes, game 2 is more their average, but they are capable of what they did in game 1. If Trae Young is getting to where he wants on the floor and is finding those guys on the perimeter, and like we just talked about at the top, those guys aren't blinking. Those guys are not afraid of those moments.
Now, I want to take it back to the Sixers Raptors series a couple of years ago, right? So everybody's going crazy that Nick Nurse did this and Brett Brown, and then Brett Brown made the adjustment. He put Embiid on Pascal Siakam, and that really turned that series around. It really changed that series. And then Nurse made an adjustment that the Sixers couldn't adjust to because they had no other size. It was like Greg Monroe, and that really was the difference, is Nurse had an extra adjustment. I guess the question would be is, the Hawks did what they did. The Sixers made the adjustment. Do the Hawks have the Nick Nurse move to make an adjustment to that adjustment? Or is that adjustment going to be like, if the Raptors couldn't adjust to Joel Embiid defending Pascal Siakam, they might have won that series. They had the personnel to do it. Do the Hawks have the personnel to make the adjustment to the Sixers adjustment?
Did you they're going to try? Yeah, no, I did. They're going to try. As far as Joel Embiid goes, I don't know what they can do. Clint Capella is a pretty darn good center, a very good defensive basketball player, and Joel Embiid is having his way one-on-one against him every time he gets the basketball. Their double teams have not been very good. They've shown nothing exotic. They're not really blitzing it. And I also, quite frankly, don't think they necessarily have the defensive horses that a Nick Nurse had 2 years ago to be able to do that at a high level. If we're talking Trae Young and Ben Simmons guarding him, Matisse Thybulle guarding him, yeah, they're going to try some different things. They're probably going to try to run some different actions. They're going to try to get Trae in the middle of the floor, get him into the paint where he can facilitate. One of the things that could help, again, is going to a guy like Herter, maybe either in the starting lineup or earlier in the game, because then that's one guy. When you put Solomon Hill in the game, the Sixers are thinking, okay, Solomon Hill, shoot your heart out. Like, you know what I mean? With Kevin Herter, you can't really do that. I mean, granted, you prefer Kevin Herter taking shots as opposed to Trae Young taking shots and wreaking havoc. But if you're the Hawks, you'd much prefer the ball in Herter's hands than Solomon Hill. So that could be one big adjustment I could definitely see. And the Sixers, depending on how that goes, the Sixers might have to do some adjustments off of that. And then again, as I mentioned, with the second unit, if they go to more John Collins at the 5, to me that means you can't. I don't think you could play Dwight Howard, because that's going to be a really tough matchup for him. I guess depending on game situation and all that too. But I think those are the two bigger adjustments I could see Nate McMillan making. Will they be enough? I'm not sure they will be, because I think the bottom line is what you talked about with Toronto series is that the Sixers really didn't have enough personnel to make another adjustment. Whereas the Sixers, I think, have enough personnel that they can make adjustments to whatever Atlanta is going to do.
First guy off the bench, who does Doc go to tonight? Does he go right back to the hot hand and say, Shake, let me see if you got it again? Or does he say true to his rotation?
Well, I mean, right. Well, it's been Matisse has been the first guy because for obvious reasons, just to show Trae Young a different look. I thought that was a really good – I thought the way Doc staggered in game 2 was significantly better than game 1. Granted, they still had the bench lineup that, did not work out very well, but I still thought he staggered a little better, keeping Joel and Ben on the floor together as much as humanly possible. But yeah, my guess would be those 3 guys we've already talked about as kind of being locks when you're talking about Thibault, Hill, and Dwight Howard. I don't expect that to change unless Atlanta goes more Collins at the 5. Then maybe you might see some adjustments. But yeah, I would think that the first crack is going to go to Shake Milton. I think you have to ride the hot hand and hope that maybe Shake has found his confidence a little bit here, because quite frankly, Maxey and Korkmaz haven't been very, like, in this series, as good as Maxey was in the first series, he really hasn't made an impact through 2 games, and Korkmaz, he's kind of in the place that Milton was, where he can't get anything to go right now. So I would imagine Doc's going to ride the hot hand, and Shake Milton is at the very least going to get the first crack at being that quote unquote 9th guy.
Should be interesting. 7:30 tonight, right here on 97.3 ESPN. A couple more with our Sixers insider, Paul Hudrick, at Paul Hudrick. Follow him for all the Sixers news. And obviously, they have had 2 days off here. I know Joel Embiid listed as questionable, but there's no indication or anything that would suggest he would not be the Joel Embiid we've seen over the first 2 games, where he's averaging 39.5 points per game.
I would think so. I mean, it's just, I guess with travel, this whole series, he might be listed as questionable in every single game. That just might be the reality of it.
By the way, my father's a big fan of yours. He loves listening to our segments. Man, that Hudrick guy is really good. I said, yeah, he's pretty good, man.
I appreciate that.
But he said, but is he going to be listed at question? Are we going to have to go through this the whole way? I said, yeah,
yes.
But here's the thing. We know the Sixers. You know the Sixers better than most. They have been overly cautious with injuries over the year. So I can't imagine they're putting this guy at any risk by putting him out there with any thought that he can really seriously hurt himself. The way that they've handled injury, they didn't all of a sudden become the team that was overly cautious to reckless.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a group. I'm sure it's a group thing, right? I mean, it probably goes all the way up to Daryl Morey, all the way down, to the athletic training staff and the sports science staff and everybody, the team doctors. Everybody probably has weighed in and kind of made a group decision. I'm sure Joel knows, what the possibilities are of what could happen. If God forbid, it worsens. I'm sure they're looking at it thoroughly. I'm sure he's getting examined every day as far as, if there's anything different or anything that he's feeling that's, atypical of what he's been feeling. But so far, so good. I mean, they're managing it very well. From what I understand, like the physical therapy, the idea is to strengthen the rest of the muscles around it so it stabilizes the knee better, so that, to your point, you're not risking any further injury. So, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to keep being careful, but of course there's going to be an element of risk, because you're talking about a meniscus tear and a 7 foot, 280 pound human that's playing professional basketball. So of course there's going to be some risk involved, but so far so good. They managed it very well. And to your point, I think if it took a turn south in any way, I think they would certainly reevaluate how they're managing everything.
A couple quickies on the other 2. If I told you that Antetokounmpo was 14 of 31 and 1 for 8 from 3-point range, did they beat the Nets?
No, I mean, first of all, the fact that he took 8 threes, I would have assumed that they were down all game long for him to be jacking up that many threes. And this is where I've seen a lot of people discuss this on Twitter, and it's so like the Ben Simmons Giannis thing, because there are a lot of parallels to them and their skill sets. And I think if you could like somehow find a way for both of them to find a happy medium, like Giannis is sometimes can be too aggressive and take too many threes, in my opinion, and do some things out of his comfort zone that hurts the team. Whereas Ben Simmons sometimes doesn't do enough of that stuff. He's not aggressive enough sometimes and doesn't do enough stuff out of his comfort zone. So there's got to be like a happy medium for both of those guys. But yeah, if you had told me that, no. And I also, if you told me that the Milwaukee Bucks were going to not score 100 points and beat the Nets, I would have called you crazy. That was a super weird game, and we'll see what happens in game 4.
And it's like, did Durant play a good game last night, or was he off? He scored 30 and had 11 rebounds, but at the end of the day, it was like, He kind of didn't have a great game. Kind of, maybe.
No,
Did he?
I would say the whole Nets team, actually. It seemed like they kind of all were off. Like, no one really had a particularly – I mean, Joe Harris missed a ton of shots.
1 for 7, Joe, for from 3, 1 of 11 on the night.
Yeah, and Bruce Brown lost his damn mind at one point. I mean, it was a weird game. And they just – and quite – that's kind of what's scary about the Brooklyn Nets is that really they didn't play well, and they still had an absolute chance to win the game at the buzzer. So that's what's so scary about this team. But we'll see. I mean, in the playoffs, Mike, it does not matter how you win. If it's ugly, if it's pretty, if it's by 1, if it's by 20, it does not matter. So now the Milwaukee Bucks have protected home court, and we'll see what happens game 4.
Absolutely agree with that. Don't care how we win it. All right, Paul Hudrick, he's got you covered tonight for Sixers and the Hawks game 3. It's right here on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage begins at 7:30, and then it's Friday, Monday, excuse me. Monday night, we do not have a game time. As soon as we get that, we'll pass that along to you. All right, Paul is back on Monday with a recap of game number 3 and a preview of game number 4. Thanks, man.
You got it, Mike. Take care, man.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. He is Paul Hudrick, our Sixers insider. You remember him from NBC Sports Philadelphia, and now, of course, he covers the Sixers for 97.3 ESPN.com. When we come back, we're going to flip over to the Phillies are hosting the Yankees. Why are these two teams so mediocre? And yesterday I said, I don't want to trade Rhys Hoskins, but is there a better way to get out of mediocrity? I'll ask Bob Wankle if he has the answer. From Crossing Broad, covers the Phils. He's up next. 3:41. No Phils tonight. I don't know. I guess that's the second time they haven't played on a Friday. If I'm the Phillies, Bob Wankle, Crossing Broad, covers the Phils. If I'm the Phillies and I have the Yankees in town, I'm asking to play a 3-game set. I didn't have any fans in the stands last year, and I know I'm not getting very many so far this year. But if I have the Yankees in town, give me the extra game, please, and thank you. Can get the gate, please?
Yeah, let's play 4. Let's make it a 4-game set if you're the Phillies right now.
Play a doubleheader tonight. I mean, I don't know. I guess the Yankees might be playing tonight, and maybe that's why the Phillies can't get this game in. Yankees are off too. The Yankees are off too, by the way.
Yeah, it's just a weird scheduling quirk where they're splitting up these interleague series, and this is what they're doing. And I gotta say, this is a huge series for the Phillies. Coming off of a series win against the Braves, a little enthusiasm, a little momentum here. But Phillies, not only is it a big series for the Phillies on the field, but they need people to get into the stadium. I mean, 13,000 people plus again yesterday. They haven't topped 16,000 yet. They really need a good weekend at the gate.
They do. And what I asked you last week, I mean, they were letting people back in for the first time, and you said, "Oh, it's Friday night probably," and then maybe nothing. They got nothing all weekend long. Is the message we're not? It's hard to say. Oh, I'm not ready to go back. The Sixers are selling the place out. It seems like people don't mind going indoors and sitting next to people. You're outside. Phillies game is the message. I'm not ready, or I don't care.
Mike, I don't know, man. I got to tell you, when I go out to restaurants and bars and just kind of go about my business, go to stores now, it seems like the world is normalizing a little bit. So I don't think that COVID can be blamed for what we're seeing at Citizens Bank Park right now. I just think it's a genuine lack of interest in the team. I think that this is a team that's played under 500. They've been the same team for much of the last 3 years. Just seems awfully similar, and I just don't think there's a lot of interest.
I would agree. And my buddy's a Yankee fan. He texts me, says, "Do I want to go to the game tomorrow?" And I said, this is a microcosm of mediocrity. Do I want to spend my money on two teams that are probably the two biggest underachieving payrolls in baseball? You know, you got the Yankees number 2 in payroll, the Phillies number 5, and here they both are. They're 6 games out, and the Phillies are 3.5. Let me ask you this. Which of these two teams has a better shot at making the playoffs? Them 6 games out right now, or Phillies 3.5 out right now?
I believe I saw earlier today, Baseball Prospectus gives the Phillies a better chance of winning the World Series than the Yankees right now.
Wow.
So, you look at the NL East, and I think the NL East is open, right? And I think that the AL East is very good with really how Tampa's played and what the Red Sox have done out of the gates. And so I think that the Phillies probably have a clearer path to the postseason than the Yankees do right now. We'll say we've talked a lot lately, and most of the conversation's been negative, right, Mike? I have to say here, the Phillies had a nice little 6-game stretch. They've gone 4-2 against 2 division opponents that many people thought were better than they were, and they're back in second place here. The Luke Williams story the other night was really nice, and Zach Wheeler's been out of his mind. I mean, the Phillies actually have some positive momentum for one of the very few times this season right now.
Don't get me started on the Luke Williams story, by the way. It's a nice story, but isn't this also a microcosm of your issues? Is that you've needed Nick Maton. You've needed Luke Williams because you're so short in your organization that you're just bringing like 4A players along and they're helping you win games.
Yeah, I mean, like you can look at that as a positive or a negative. Like in an ideal world, you wouldn't be counting on guys like Luke Williams to win games. But I mean, over the course of a Major League Baseball season, guys are going to get hurt. There's going to be holes, and you need guys that can step in and do something for you. Now, is Luke Williams a long-term answer for the Phillies? I have no idea, but he does provide versatility.
Who give us a little background on who he is? Where did he come from? I mean, everybody, is there's a guy who was on Team USA a week ago. He wasn't even on the 40-man roster.
Yeah, a guy that wasn't on the 40-man. He was taken, I believe, I guess it was 6 years ago. West Coast guy, a little over $700,000 signing bonus. A guy, though, that like this organization, I think, had some expectations for. He really kind of had underachieved a little bit his first couple.
It sounds like we got Bob frozen here on the Sports Bash. There he goes. We got you back here. You said that he underachieved.
Yeah, he underachieved a little bit, but he made some tweaks to his swing during COVID, lowered his hands. He was talking about this a little bit the other day, and actually has done a really nice job at AAA this season, and the guy that sort of put himself on the map over the last year.
Well, obviously, Maton had a great start. He was hitting like on fire. Then he cooled off so much so that they sent him back. I hope Luke Williams is a great story. The fairy tale beginning, I hope, has a fairy tale ending. I'm not holding my breath. That being said, you are right. They have played. They took 2 out of 3 from Washington. They got 2 out of 3 from Atlanta. But their schedule, if you haven't noticed, coming up is pretty brutal. They've got a stretch of games coming up. They got to go out to West to play the Dodgers. That's not fun. I mean, they got the 49ers, the Giants, who are, by the way, led by Gabe Kapler in first place and at a time had the best record in baseball, and they're still right there. So this series starting with this mediocre Yankees team, this is going to be an interesting stretch of games to find out where this team will be once we get right around the 4th of July.
Yeah, I mean, I think this team definitely at a crossroads here, right? I think that this can go one of two ways. The Phillies make their move, or they're going to fall out of contention. And I think that they're going to have an opportunity here with a difficult West Coast swing, and then followed by a slew of division games played in the NL East. I think we're going to know where this team's at about 2.5, 3 weeks from now. Will they be a team that's going to add at the trade deadline? Are they a team that's going to kind of, make a move here? Or could they be in a potential situation where they decide to sell, which I know is something that you and I have both talked about at different points.
Yeah, and by the way, they're going to, I guess you could say catch a little bit of a break in the series because Aaron Boone said today that Giancarlo Stanton is not going to play at all in the series because he's not ready to play the outfield. So this is a team that can't score to begin with, and one of their lone offensive bright spots is not going to play in either of the 2 games.
Yeah, they have a situation here where they can possibly do some damage this weekend. I mean, if the Phillies can win both of these games and close this homestand, I guess that would make them 6-2 over an 8-game stretch. I got to say, like at that point, you're over 500, you have some momentum, and maybe that starts to drum up some interest that really just has not been there, for the last month and a half.
All right, couple good things. All right, before we get to the negative, I don't want to do negative first. I want to talk good. How good is Zach Wheeler? And I'll ask you, if they had to play in a playoff series and game 1 came, don't they have to pitch Wheeler in that game 1? Is he now their guy?
Yeah, I mean, the Phillies can't be in the business of saying, hey, Aaron Nola's been our ace, or, we owe it to him as an organization or anything like that. Right now, if everything kind of just continued as is, Zach Wheeler is not only the Phillies' best pitcher, but he's one of the 5, I would argue, one of the 5 best pitchers in all of baseball right now. He's been absolutely phenomenal. It got thrown out there a little bit yesterday, but 13 career double-digit strikeout games, and 4 of those games have come over his last 5 starts. He's been awesome.
Not only has he been awesome, he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball, as you chronicled over at Bob Wankle CB on Twitter. He's been their guy. There's no question about it. All right, now to the negative here. Sorry. Yesterday I mentioned that I don't want to trade Rhys Hoskins. I think you and I are in agreement here. I don't want to. This guy says, I'm sick of you saying this. I don't want to trade Rhys Hoskins. But what other, if Dave Dombrowski deems we're mediocre and this is who we are, he's the only realistic trade thing that gets you something back that anybody else. Nobody wants Bryce Harper's contract. Nobody wants JT Realmuto's contract. Maybe they want Wheeler's contract. Okay, so maybe you can say him. But if it's a cheap guy who gets you something back, isn't Hoskins the only realistic trade option on this team?
Yeah, I think that Zach Wheeler's contract at this point is pretty team friendly. That looks like a bargain. So outside of Wheeler, which would probably net you a substantial return, Rhys Hoskins is the guy. And, fans always want to make their team better. They always want to upgrade, but they want to do it with, by trading fringe players, your third, fourth tier players, by trading, minor leaguers that really aren't even prospects. I mean, in order to make a dramatic change to your roster, in order to make a dramatic change to your organization, sometimes you have to make moves that hurt a little bit. And, Rhys Hoskins was a guy that was a face of the franchise type player a few years ago, a guy that I think a lot of people expected to be here for 10 years plus, and certainly has a lot of value. I mean, he's on a team friendly deal. He doesn't cost a lot. You see see that he has 35 home run potential. He's probably going to knock in 100 runs, even though he's a very streaky hitter. You got to do something that hurts sometimes. And if they get to a point 4 or 5 weeks from now where they decide we don't have it, we've got to do something serious. There's 3 guys that they could trade that would truly.
We lost Bob there for a second. He's frozen up on us. 2 guys we could trade. I think Rhys Hoskins is one. Who's the other?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Aaron Nola and Zach Wheeler are the 3 guys that you could potentially make a deal with. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I don't want to trade Rhys Hoskins if I don't have to. But if I want to change, this is a mediocre team. This is who they are. I don't know that you mentioned. Are they going to win 15 games in a row, 10 out of 12, 12 out of 15? Probably not. If that doesn't happen, this is who you are for the 5th straight year. So if you are this team for 5 years in a row, just hanging around 500, at some point, somebody's going to have to step in here and say, I've got to change it up. I got to change the mojo. I don't want to trade you, but you're the most tradable guy. And I agree with that because realistically, you look around. Okay, Gene Segura, yeah, I could trade him. I'm not getting anything back in return. DD, same thing. I go to left field. McCutchen, I'm not getting anything back for him. Herrera, as well as he's played, you're not getting anything back for him. Right? Nobody wants Harper's contract. Nobody wants Real Muto's contract. The 2 guys you could trade are either Bohm or Hoskins. Flip a coin. And I would imagine that Hoskins gets you back more in return than Bohm does right now.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want to be, if I'm in the Phillies position, I have so many high-priced guys on my roster already. I'm in no position to want to or in no rush to try to trade Alec Bohm. I don't see the wisdom in doing that. And I think that this Phillies team knows it. I think the Phillies know that they're in a spot where they've got to go and they've got to go right now. So this is going to be a really interesting couple of weeks because if they don't get it done, I think some of the veterans in that locker room know that things are going to change.
And you also have to keep in mind, it's hard to make a franchise-altering move to go backwards when you have Bryce Harper on that deal, right? Isn't part of the selling point to get him here is we're trying to win, so I can't start stripping this whole thing apart.
Yeah, if they determine that this is not the core that they want to move forward with, this isn't going to be like a rebuild. It's not going to be like, hey, let's sell off all of our best players and try to get some guys that have high ceilings down in low A. They've got to completely reshape things, but they have to do it on the fly where they can sell the idea that they're going to remain competitive and that they can be competitive in 2022 and beyond. The Phillies cannot go backwards here for 3, 4, 5 years. They just are not in a position to do that.
It is Vince Velasquez, Jameson Talion for New York. The pitching for the Yankees has been very good. Herman's going on Sunday against Aaron Nola. Nola's been, man, what is up with him?
Just been underwhelming. You look at it, though, the velocity's not down. The movement is the same. But he just, the fastball command is what jumps out at me. I just feel like he and not just me, but a lot of people feel that he's just been a little bit too fine, especially when he gets ahead in the count. He's just afraid of making mistakes, and I think that he's feeling it a little bit too much, and he's left some fat fastballs, and when he makes mistakes right now, he's being pummeled with them.
Bob Wankle, by the way, Ocean City Mainland, who wins? Saturday, 11 o'clock.
I got to tell you, I think Ocean City's going to win.
All right. Just keeps it quick because we're out of time. No follow-up there.
No follow-up.
All right.
Just a gut.
Gannon Brady and Mark Elliott, I believe, will be the starters.
It's going to be an awesome game. Both are very, very good teams.
It should be a lot of fun. 11 o'clock on Saturday. All right, Bob. Have a good weekend, pal.
You too, man. Talk to you soon.
He's Bob Wankle from Crossing Broad at Bob Wankle CB. And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Bob is also the manager for the Triton baseball team who just played Mainland last weekend in a great game. Don't forget, on the other side, we got football at 4. The Eagles have brought back a familiar face. They've made a signing today, 2 signings actually. One a familiar face and the other a wide receiver. Does he have a shot to have a role on this team? We'll ask Andrew DiCecco inside the Birds next on Football at 4. Yes, indeed. Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, a new version dropped on Thursday. The new one comes out on Monday at 6 o'clock. You can check that out with Jeff Mosher and Adam Kaplan. Right now from InsideTheBirds.com, Andrew DiCecco is here as the Eagles have made a couple of signings today. Both interesting, in my opinion. The message for one, I want to get Andrew's thoughts on this. I gave you my thoughts on it, and I will do so with Andrew DiCecco now on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. By the way, Football at 4 is brought to you by PropSwap, America's sports betting marketplace. Sell your sports bet and take your profit. Find out how at PropSwap.com and download the PropSwap app today. Andrew, happy hour Friday, my man. What's going on?
Hey, Mike, how you doing today?
All is good. All is good, man. Friday edition, always a little extra pep in my step on the Friday, and good to have you here because I know, obviously, the Eagles made a couple of moves today. Let's start off with tight end Richard Rodgers, who is back. Not much of a surprise, I would guess. But what's to me, the message of bringing Rodgers back? I know they needed a tight end, but doesn't that kind of suggest, hey, we think we can win the East, we'll bring a veteran back up in? Like, if they don't think they're a good team, don't they just stick with a young guy, get him some playing time and experience? Instead, they go with a veteran like Richard Rodgers. I mean, is that suggesting that, hey, we think we can compete in this division?
Well, if you remember over the past number of weeks and even as recent as our last conversation, Richard Rodgers was a name that I said that the Eagles really had to bring in when, I mean, you named those three guys, Hakeem Butler and the Tyree Jacksons and Jack Stahl and all those guys that are kind of vying for the third job. I said that I wasn't a fan of any of them. And I said that the Eagles really needed to bring in Richard Rodgers, who was just sitting out there along with Trey Burton, get a veteran in there, really provide some depth. Regardless of whether you have Zach Ertz in the fold or not, you need to add a competent third or, second tight end, Richard Rodgers has shown he can be, to the mix, because none of those guys that we talked about, they're back end of the roster fringe players that are long shots at best to make the roster. A lot of projects, and Hakeem Butler may be more of a practice squad option, but you really wanted to add a veteran in Richard Rodgers, who's just a technically savvy player. He's not flashy. He gives you a little bit as a blocker. He made some great catches last season and really came through. He had 24 catches for 345 yards and 2 touchdowns in 14 games, 4 starts last year. So he really stepped up, and I do think he has a little bit of juice left in the tank to bring in the offense.
Yeah, no, if you end up trading Zach Ertz, I mean, he steps in as that second guy, and he showed last year when Ertz and Goddard were banged up a little bit. He stepped in. He had a game where he had 6 catches for 85 yards. He had a game where he had 4 catches for 60 yards. He had a game where he had 3 for 53. So he has proved, as you kind of alluded to, capable as a receiver, but he's also a good blocker. So it doesn't mean if Ertz is gone and Goddard steps in that they don't have a second guy that can be a part of the pass game, right? I mean, this is the guy that in Green Bay had a pretty big year one year with 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, he was a starter in Green Bay. So, I mean, having him in the mix, like I said, if you keep Zach Ertz, well, then Richard Rodgers is as good a third tight end as you're going to find in the NFL. If you move on from Zach Ertz, which is, a high probability down the road here, Richard Rodgers is proven to be a competent tight end in this league. I mean, he'd be a great number 2 tight end. Kind of gives you the best of both worlds with Dallas Goedert. You have nothing to lose if you're the Eagles by bringing him into camp. You need another veteran there to compete with some of those guys, because, like I said, the guys that you mentioned, yeah, they may be intriguing. They're young players. Tyree Jackson, the converted quarterback from Buffalo, and Hakeem Butler, of course, was a receiver, a decorated receiver at Iowa State. Now he's a tight end and struggling a little bit there as well to find his footing. They're good projects, but they're not long-term fixtures. They're not options you want to count on. If you get anything out of them, it's more of a bonus. So I think you really needed to add a veteran there to add stability.
Yep, they did that today. Richard Rodgers, it will be his 4th year with the Eagles, 24 catches, 345 yards, 2 touchdowns in 14 games last year, 29 years old. And I guess the follow-up to all this is, does bringing Rodgers back clearly signify the end of Zach Ertz, or is Rodgers here to be the third end in conjunction with Goddard and Ertz like he has been in the past?
Yeah, like I said, that signing needed to happen regardless of whether or not Zach Ertz is in their immediate future or not, because they need to that position in a big way.
All right, Andrew, they also brought in, and I know you know a little bit about wide receiver Michael Walker, who was a Boston College wide receiver, kind of a slot guy, but I saw you tweet about him. Well, it was from 2019, but you brought it back up to the top of your timeline. So I was kind of interested in hearing your thoughts on, is he just a camp guy, or is Michael Walker a guy that has a shot to make the team?
I think he's more of a camp guy. I actually interviewed Michael Walker in the pre-draft process in 2019. 5'11", 194. He's more of in the mold of a slot receiver. He was a prolific return man in college. He was the nation's leader in kick return yards in 2018, and he also finished, I believe it was 7th or 8th in the nation in punt return yards. So he's going to give you some production there. He's a better kick returner than he is punt returner, north-south type of returner. Doesn't do a whole lot of dancing around. We had 70-ish catches, I believe, at Boston College, under 1,000 yards, under 900 yards, I even think. So he wasn't really a receiving threat there, or a prominent receiving threat there. I think he's more of a special teams guy, could push there, but I really don't see how he fits here. I think that if you're the Eagles, you're thinking, let's get a guy he played in 13 games last season. He had a couple of receptions. Let's bring a guy who has some NFL experience that can give you some quality reps in training camp, maybe push some of these young guys like the John Hightowers of the world and see what you got. I mean, he's not exactly, I think he's 25 as well. So, I mean, he's a little bit of an older young player. He's not very experienced in the league, but he came into the league, I believe, at an older age at 23. So, I mean, yeah, it's going to add some competition.
Yeah, of course, everybody sees like a smaller slot kind of guy and says, oh, is he Wes Welker? Can he be that kind of guy? I mean, as you tweeted out, 4.46, a guy had some impressive numbers when he was coming into the league.
Yeah, and he has some NFL experience, and I think when you're looking at the receiver position, it's going to add a little bit of competition. But I always encourage folks, let's not get carried away. You saw what happened with Trayvon Grimes, and that's just yet another example of why you don't want to get carried away with these end of the roster guys that are these fringe guys, these undrafted free agents. You got to let things materialize before you crown somebody as the wide receiver 5 or 6, or their new red zone guy, or their new, gadget guy, slot guy. I mean, just, you got to be patient and let things kind of work themselves out.
I know that, as you mentioned, everybody kind of gets excited, but some people, I know Pro Football Focus is calling Jalen Reagor like kind of the breakout candidate for 2021. You know how Eagles fans see that kind of stuff and start to go a little crazy, Andrew, but what about Reagor kind of entices you to kind of say, hey, this is the guy that can go from very minimal production to possibly big production in 2021?
Well, it's a couple of things, Mike. It's the change in his demeanor and attitude, and I think it's also the creativity and openness of the coaching staff. And when I say openness, I mean open to sort of scheming around their strengths instead of kind of pigeonholing them into a hole and making them do things that maybe they're not as adept at doing. And I think when the Eagles selected Jalen Reagor, they envisioned him being a multifaceted receiver that they can get the ball to in a number of ways. And he really was used in a vanilla manner last season. They weren't very creative in getting him the football. That was Jalen's fault, because I thought that he was his route running efficiency was lacking. I thought he squeezed too often to the sideline, didn't show a lot of awareness or crisp, suddenness in his route running, and I thought that he lost concentration at times. I also wasn't crazy about his body language when things weren't going his way. But, when you heard Aaron Moorhead talk I guess it was last week or earlier this week, he said he was a lot calmer. Things starting to settle down and that makes perfect sense. That's very typical with the second-year player. I think that he's a more confident player now. Remember, he was kind of thrown into the Philadelphia fan base, and he wasn't used to being subject of criticism, so he had to get used to that as well. And like I said, every young player adjusts to the NFL, to the professional level, at different rates. And Justin Jefferson was an immediate success, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because Jalen Reagor wasn't that he's not going to be. So I think that the coaching staff, they've said all the right things. Jalen Reagor seems to be in the right mindset to sort of take off in year 2. But again, we have to see everything sort of take shape in this summer and see how it goes.
Andrew DiCecco, football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. You were last on Tuesday, so I didn't get a chance to ask you because obviously Andrew knows a lot about drafted guys, undrafted guys coming into the league. And Jamie Newman, the quarterback, he didn't even make it to training camp. Are you surprised that Newman was not even able to get out of OTAs?
Yes, I was surprised that he couldn't get out of OTAs because it's OTAs. It's very basic. You're not really, you're sort of just the surface level stuff. You have to be, they have to really not see, or you have to be a very long ways away from being a player who can contend for a roster spot in just 6 weeks from now. He must have been so much of a project that the coaching staff didn't feel like they had enough time to work with him. And that said something that he, cleared waivers and no other team really put in a claim for him. I think he's going to be around, and he might be one of those early to mid-season practice squad guys that people sign and they see if they can kind of get him into a futures contract. I just, right now, he's just so far away from being and it's really stems from his accuracy. He's very erratic with the football. And if you're not making those throws in OTAs where things are very basic, and they're sort of like it's an introductory course.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how you're going to do it when things are coming at you fast and furious in training camp.
So in the replace, they got to bring another guy in. I mean, they only have 2 guys on the roster.
Mm-hmm.
Do they go, down that undrafted free agent route, or do you think you go more to a veteran guy who is kind of kicked it? Yesterday Adam mentioned Nick Mullins, Sean Mannion. I mean, those kind of journeyman type of undrafted guys who have some veteran experience. Do you go down that road, or you think that there are guys who are still out there that played college last year that have some intrigue?
Yeah, I'm sure there are some college guys that haven't latched on the rosters yet, but I think that I really liked Adam's point when he said Nick Mullins, because I think Nick Mullins would be a great fit as a quarterback 3. He's well versed in the West Coast offense. So does he have a big arm to push the ball down the field? No, but he's competent enough. He processes things relatively quick. And look, he gives you everything you need from a number 3 quarterback.
Yeah.
And that would give proper support behind Jalen Hurts with Joe Flacco, and then a guy like Nick Mullins, who's seen a lot in his time in the NFL.
Yeah, I agree with the West Coast offense is something that Adam brought up yesterday. Those are both guys. And Mullins, by the way, has 16 games of starting experience. If you can get a third guy who has started 16 games, you could do a lot worse than that. Mannion, doesn't interest me all that much. I think he started a game or 2. But Mullins, I'm a little surprised he's still out there. If you remember the game he played against Philly last year, he was the guy who threw that interception to Alex Singleton, who took it back for a touchdown. And then they benched him and brought C.J. Beathard in, who almost brought them back. But Mullins at least has started 16 games in his career. I know Trayvon Grimes also. Now, he was in injury designation, but you had kind of said pump the brakes on Grimes, everybody. You're getting a little too excited because people thought this guy's going to make the team. He's going to replace J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. But were you surprised that he didn't make it to training camp potentially yet, I guess?
Well, injuries are always it's a dicey situation. But I mean, again, if he is ready for training camp, he's a little bit behind the 8 ball, or he will be if it takes a little bit longer and he's healthy midway through training camp. That's why you don't want to jump the gun. He also hasn't faced live action in training camp. It's a lot different running around in shorts than when you have Darius Slay lined up across from you and you have to figure out a way to separate and come up with these contested catches and red zone plays. You know what I mean? Like there's so much that goes into it, rather than, I think sometimes folks get intrigued with the name and the college, but you really have to look at what the player is good at and what he's not good at, what he needs to work on. And some of the things that he needs to work on are things that an NFL receiver you really have to have as an undrafted player. You really need to have that, like route running. That's a big thing. That, I mean, if you're an undrafted player and you know how to run routes and separate, you have a chance. But if you're an unrefined route runner and questionable hands and things like that, you can have all the body control and the size and the catch radius all that you want. But the training camp comes down to consistency as a young player, and those are things that they're not really going to have time to really correct.
Andrew, I want to get your opinion on a couple of NFL stories that are happening right now. One, Green Bay, if Aaron Rodgers does not come back, your thoughts on Jordan Love? Where did you think of him coming out of the draft last year? Can he step right in and have the lineage of Favre, Rodgers, Love?
I think he's all right. I thought he was okay. I wasn't super high on him, to be honest with you. His play is too high and low. He's erratic with the ball. I think he takes a little bit too many chances, particularly his last season there at Utah State. The year before, he was much better, but he has a strong arm, and I think that he sees the field well, but I think he doesn't necessarily – I think he rushes things. And in the NFL, I feel like there's going to be a lot of pressure on him right now for him to seize control of that top spot with everything going on with Aaron Rodgers, that he may press a little bit. And I've seen him press before, and that leads to a lot of careless turnovers and things like that.
Yeah, now that being said, if you're Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers is saying, I don't want to play, do you just say, fine, don't play, or do you try to help them out by trading him? I'd almost be like, you don't want to play? Fine, don't play. I'll fine you.
I mean, that's the thinking. That's the school of thought that I would go with.
I guess the other side of it is, Andrew.
They're going to, when you're Aaron Rodgers, you have a little bit of leverage.
You do, but I guess the other side is, okay, then if I could trade Aaron Rodgers, I'm going to get back multiple picks, and I guess you're kind of cut your nose to spite your face. But why am I going to help another team out and give them Aaron Rodgers? I'll just say, Aaron Rodgers, you don't want to play? Don't play. Fine.
I feel like they eventually have to mend the fences and find a way to make it work for Green Bay. Because, like you said, why hand a team a quarterback who's still, a top quarterback in the league, and another team better and a Super Bowl contender, right?
Yeah,
I think they know what they have there, and they may be pumping up Jordan Love into the media, but they may have their own concerns, and they may see other things that sort of the things that a lot of the draft evaluators, including myself, saw. I don't necessarily know if Jordan Love has it between the ears right now to be a franchise signal caller. So, I mean, eventually those things are going to start to creep up in training camp when he's going to force some throws that are going to get you in trouble. And I think that they're going to need to find a way to get Aaron Rodgers back in the fold. And I think ultimately that's what they're going to have to do.
Here's Andrew DiCecco, DiCecco NFL. It's funny. I was where was I the other day? It wasn't near here. I mean, I was pretty far out of the range. I mean, our signal goes pretty far. And the guy says, man, that DiCecco really knows his stuff. And I said, you're right. He does. He loved all the draft coverage, the offseason coverage as well. And Andrew, of course, on Tuesdays and Fridays for football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. And he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks for knowing your stuff, Andrew. I appreciate you, bud.
My pleasure, Mike. Have a great weekend.
You do the same. It's Happy Hour Friday here on the Sports Bash. That's Andrew DiCecco. He is Football at 4. This is 97.3 ESPN, and he, like August, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And this hour of the show, it's brought to you by Prop Swap. Let me tell you about my friends at Prop Swap. You've been hearing me talk about Prop Swap for a long time, but sometimes I'm not sure that you truly understand how to take advantage of Prop Swap. Well, now's a great time to do it. You've got all these series going on in the NBA. In the Western Conference, it's wide open. So here's what I suggest you do. Go out and get a ticket for all 4 of these teams. The odds to win the Western Conference, they're all pretty close. You can get a Utah ticket at 13-10, or a Phoenix ticket at 3-1, a Clippers ticket at 2-1, or whatever they are at your favorite sports book. Buy all those tickets. Eventually, someone's going to become the favorite. And then you can post that ticket at PropSwap.com for the odds that you get today. It's the best way to kind of spin it and make money and prop swap it. Go to PropSwap.com or download the PropSwap app. A lot of people are at, what's this Prop Swap? What am I doing now? It's easy. It's simple. You go up to your favorite sports book at the casino. You go in there and buy a couple of futures bets or a couple of props, Like, for instance, let's click on the old NBA futures here. What do I got? Well, I got the Suns at plus 600. You think the Suns can win the NBA title? I do. At DraftKings right now, it's plus 650. Buy it at plus 650, and let's say they win this series and then make it to the finals. You have that plus 650 ticket, and you could sell it at PropSwap.com. It's the only place where you can buy and sell sports bets for the best odds in the country. PropSwap.com. Download the PropSwap app today. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Batch. When we come back, all right, it's the weekend edition of Do You Remember? And it's next. All right, do you remember? These are all things that happened on this day. It's the weekend edition, so we got a bunch of events for you today. They're brought to you by JCPenney. Make way for Father's Day at JCPenney's Friends and Family Sale, going on now through Sunday. Score the hottest savings styles and gifts for Dad at JCPenney. I'm Mike Gill. My producer is Josh Henning. He is with me for a look at what happened on this weekend.
How do you do?
On these days, I should say, eh? I always do good, Josh. I think, anyway. I didn't sleep well. But I'm up. I'm here. I'm doing the show. I woke up at like 3 in the morning. I was up till 5:15, fell asleep, woke back up.
Yeah, you and I are both very tired. From
Well, you were at the PFL.
Yeah, it was a late night. Yeah, they didn't start that ESPN2 card till the baseball game ended, so it was like 10:20.
Yeah, that's a bad job by them.
I mean, ESPN's got to tell the College World Series to speed it up a little bit, man.
All right, these are things that happened on this day. You ready?
Sure.
You looking forward to this one, eh?
Hey, now.
This is Larry Holmes retains the heavyweight title. He knocks out Jerry Cooney in the 13th round at Caesars Palace in Vegas. Holmes versus Cooney. It was the most anticipated heavyweight fight to occur between the Muhammad Ali and Tyson eras.
Yeah, I never thought I would throw Jerry Cooney in that conversation, but hey, man, good for you.
Right? Jerry Cooney, Larry Holmes, 1982. Jerry Cooney down in the 13th. They don't go 13 anymore.
That era was, I mean, I remember I interviewed the director a couple weeks ago, the Kings on Showtime. I mean, I got the sneak peek of that thing. Excellent. I mean, that was the Hagler, Leonard, Duran, Hearns era, so nobody cared about the heavyweight.
93, Jordan and the Bulls, Barkley and the Suns. They each scored 42. Chicago wins 111-108, making the first time in NBA Finals history that two players on opposing teams each scored 40 or more in a finals game.
That was the only finals I was genuinely rooting against the Bulls.
Well, you wanted Barkley to finally get one. He doesn't do it, and
I like that Suns team. It was a fun team to watch.
And Thunder Dan,
Kevin Johnson. Forget about him. Danny Ainge on the team too.
Yeah, there's one other guy. It was Cedric Sabalas on that team.
Yeah, he was hanging around.
97, playing with a stomach virus. Michael Jordan scores 38. He hits the game-clinching three-pointer. 90-88. Bulls beat the Jazz at the Delta Center. Game 5 of the NBA Finals. The contest is simply known as the flu game. But Jordan revealed in a 2020 documentary, The Last Dance, that he believed it was food poisoning from pizza delivered the night before the game. The win gave the Bulls a 3-2 lead in the finals. They won in Game 6.
And it's funny because I remember that part of the documentary, The Last Dance, and they talk about it in the book I read as well about him. And it seems like most people believe it was a bit of a conspiracy. No one seems to want to back off at that point.
Yeah, there were some people disputing his take that the pizza guy delivered it.
Yeah, a little suspicious.
2005, Mike Tyson. He quit after the 6th round against journeyman boxer Kevin McBride. It was at the MCI Center in Washington. The loss was Tyson's final fight. Yeah, that was kind of a sad end to the whole thing. Kevin McBride, what a stiff he was.
You just said the MCI Center. That in of itself is just dated.
Yeah. I think I wrote an article when the Sixers played the Wizards, and I said MCI Center in the article.
Did you really?
Yeah, I think so. Bad job by me.
That makes me laugh, though.
What's it called now? What's MCI? Are they in business anymore?
No. MCI got absorbed technically by what's now known as Sprint T-Mobile.
All right. 1939, the National Baseball Hall of Fame opens in Cooperstown, New York. Ty Cobb, Babe Ruth, Honus Wagner, Christy Mathewson, and Walter Johnson. They're the first class of the Baseball Hall of Fame. You ever been?
No, I always wanted to be.
Very cool. You got to go more than a day, though. You can't get through there in a day, I don't think, unless you have all day. I rushed through the day I was there. I was there.
Maybe like a little mini vacation. Maybe go get a hotel.
Oh yeah, you got to stay for the weekend.
Stay up there.
You
go
can do
one
it in
day,
probably
go
2 days.
Day.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. I went with my baseball team. We were playing about an hour and a half away from there, and on our off day, we were in the World Series in 2011. We were playing in Clifton Park, New York. We're about an hour and 45 minutes away. So on our off day, we went there. But we only had the one day to do it. In fact, the day that we were in Cooperstown, if you remember, in 2011, there was an earthquake.
Yes.
We were in Cooperstown when that happened. We're all sitting there having lunch in this little place next to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and people were like, "Did the chairs just move?" And I'm like, "I don't think I felt anything."
That was one of the most confusing days of my life because I was sitting at my last radio job, working in the studio, and I just felt the ground shaking. And I'm thinking, am I dizzy? Like, is something wrong with me?
Yes, the answer is yes.
Well, aside from the obvious.
1970, Pirates pitcher Doc Ellis throws a no-hitter over the Padres. Ellis later claimed that he pitched the game on LSD.
Yep.
Have you seen that 30 for 30?
Yes,
Or is it a 30 for
I
30?
think it's a 30 for 30 short.
Like short, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a bizarre one.
It's
like
hilarious.
all cartoons. And
Oh, yeah. It's a good time.
we're going to need you to move that.
Sorry.
Thanks. For those behind the scenes real quick, Josh is doing something on my computer that tells me how long I have left in my segment. So I looked over to see how much time I have, and there's something up in front of the clock, and I don't have any idea. All right, now I know how much
I
time.
solar eclipsed it.
There we go. You mentioned the fighters. In 1989, Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns, they fight to a draw in the rematch at Caesars Palace.
And you know what? A lot of people think that Hearn should have won that fight, but the boxing community wanted to protect the cash cow Leonard to make sure they could still make some money off of
BS,
forward.
right?
Because then remember they rematched
The third time.
Duran and Leonard, and that was ugly.
91, Scottie Pippen, 32 points, 13 rebounds. Bulls beat the Lakers 108-101 at the Great Western Forum. I love when that comes up, the Great Western Forum. To win the NBA Finals in 5 games, it was the first of 3 straight NBA titles for the Bulls. It was Phil Jackson and Finals MVP Michael Jordan. Jordan won every Finals MVP there was, all 6.
I might have heard of him.
On this day, 94, Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman were stabbed to death outside of O.J. Simpson's home in Los Angeles. That was a pretty big story.
Yeah, they interrupted the middle of the NBA Finals to watch the car chase.
O.J. was charged with the murders, but he was later acquitted.
And then years later, he lost a civil suit.
He's still kind of hanging around out there, living life.
He's got a pretty active social media following.
2002, with a 113-107 win at New Jersey, the Lakers swept the Nets in the 2002 NBA Finals. They won their 3rd consecutive title. The Lakers became the 5th team in NBA history to win it 3 straight titles. Celtics, Lakers, and the Bulls. Those Nets teams were kind of cheeky.
They were okay.
Yeah, Jason Kidd and a bunch of...
Kenya Martin, Jason Williams, Kerry Kittles, Kendall Gill. How we doing?
No relation.
Definitely.
The guy Gill that played for the Wizards, no relation.
I think
Anthony Gill. Yeah.
I think you would have been a better shooter than Kendall Gill.
Benji Gill, also no relation.
He was pretty good shortstop for like a hot second.
Yeah. 2011, Dallas Mavericks spoiled LeBron James' first season in Miami. It was on this day that they won the NBA title in 6 games, 105-95. The Mavericks win 4 of the series' last 5 games. Probably one of the most disappointing losses in LeBron James. I mean, of all the finals they lost, that Mavericks team was not the better team.
No, and the fact that J.J. Barea beat you should be embarrassing.
You keep bringing that up.
He had an amazing series.
I heard you bring that up on game night the other night.
When I live in a world where J.J. Barea outplays LeBron James, something wacky happened.
All right, a couple more. Roger Clemens' 300th win and 4,000 strikeout in a 5-2 win. What a day that is. You get your 300th win and your 4,000 strikeout in the same game. He's the only player to reach the milestone in the same game and the third to do it. Nolan Ryan and Steve Carlton are the others.
I call that
He's my
efficiency.
favorite player of all time, by the way.
I call that efficiency, Mike.
My favorite player of all time. He should be in the Hall.
He should be. I agree.
Paul Pierce, 27 points. Kevin Garnett, 10 rebounds. Boston beats the Lakers at the TD Garden. 3-2 lead in the series. Lakers come back and win it in 7 games on this day in 2010.
Only because Kendrick Perkins was injured. Remember, if
Big
Perkins
Perk.
would have played that game, Bynum doesn't go off for that double-double.
All right. And finally, Matt Cain struck out 14 through a perfect game. 10-0 win over the Astros on this day in 2012.
Yeah, Kane was part of that Giants lineage. Lincecum, Kane, Bumgarner helped to win all the World Series.
That's it right there. Do you remember those events? It'll be back on Monday's show. And, of course, you heard it here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. I am Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash. Thank you, Josh. And, of course, coming up, the Sixers take on the Atlanta Hawks. You can only hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. You can hear it nationally on ESPN Radio with the voice of ESPN Radio's NBA coverage, Sean Kelly, and he joins me next to preview the matchup here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, 442, Sixers and the Hawks game 3 tonight. You can only hear it here on 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget, Monday night we'll have it for you as well. It's the Sixers and the Hawks game number 4, 3 and 4 tonight, Monday, and then Wednesday is game 5. And you can hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. ESPN Radio's coverage starts at 7 o'clock tonight. We'll have it for you on 97.3 ESPN. The Hawks starring Trae Young host the Sixers with Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid for Game 3 of the Eastern Conference semifinals. Dave Pasch, the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame analyst Hubie Brown, and sideline reporter Malika Andrews with the call on ESPN. Sean Kelly and PJ Carlesimo on ESPN Radio. Sean Kelly, who will describe the action on the radio, he joins me now with a look as the Hawks and the Sixers game 3 tonight. And Sean, we appreciate you jumping on board. How are you, man?
I'm doing great. My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to tonight's game.
Yeah, and I know that Atlanta hasn't had meaningful playoff basketball in quite some time, but it seems that everybody down there, I mean, even like Magic Johnson's tweeting out that he's picking the Hawks in this game. It seems that people are backing this Hawks team, and that shows you the star power that they have with Trae Young.
They do. Vegas still wants the Sixers. Favored on the road, 1.5. We'll see how that goes. I did notice the over-under is like 224.5. So I better get loose with PJ and get ready for some scoring.
Yeah, and obviously these are two teams. The game 1, 128-124, we saw a lot of points. The Sixers made a big adjustment in game number 2. They put Ben Simmons on Trae Young. So what do we anticipate that Nate McMillan does tonight if Ben Simmons is on Trae Young? Is that, hey, checkmate, you got me? Or does he have another move?
Screen him to death, probably. I mean, I would anticipate tonight they try and get Trae in different spots and then screen the daylights out of Simmons. It'll be interesting to see how the game is called, too. Zach Zarba is, in my estimation, the best referee in the NBA. He's the crew chief tonight. So how physical they allow Simmons to play goes a long way, I think, in how the Hawks start tonight.
Obviously, Joel Embiid, if you haven't noticed, Sean has been pretty good in this series. Do the Hawks have an answer? I mean, I feel like this is an easy one, but can they do something to make an adjustment towards stopping or slowing Embiid, or is it like, hey, we don't care, get your 40?
No, I don't think it's that. It's remarkable. He goes from maybe he can play to 79 points in 2 games. I mean, it's unbelievable. In talking with Nate McMillan earlier today, I think what they're going to try and do is just make it, if they can, make it a little bit more uncomfortable for him to get catches in the spots that he likes. Be a little more aggressive, maybe overplay passing lanes a little bit to where he's just not catching the ball with ease and then going to work. So, look, easier said than done, but I get the idea. You don't want to let a guy get to his favorite spot, and you certainly don't want to make it easy on him on the catch, let alone, either putting it on the floor or the face-up jumper. So I don't know if that's all you can do. It probably is because he's playing so well. And maybe you do let him get his points and then try and limit them in some other way. But he's been dynamite, really, really special.
Sean Kelly will call the action for ESPN Radio's coverage of Sixers and Hawks tonight. ESPN NBA play-by-play voice here on the Sports Bash. And obviously, let me get your opinion on this. You are all around the league and see different guys. I've said before, there's only a handful of guys that legitimately, the NBA is a dynasty league. Teams go on runs. You win 3 in a row because only so many players can be the best player on the best team. Is Joel Embiid one of those guys right now? Is he a guy that at the end of this, you could say the Sixers won because they had the best player on the best team?
Yeah, well, okay, let me break that apart a little bit. So I would say that Joel Embiid right now is probably top 5 in the league just as far as individual talent goes. And he's clearly the best player on his team. Do I think the Sixers can win it all without him? No way. So if you piece all those things together and Philly were to go on and win this whole thing, then you might be able to make that argument. I will say that he's one of the most dominant players left in this thing, and I give him the edge at the moment over Nikola Jokic. who, frankly, his team hasn't shown up in their 2 games thus far in this round. But Kevin Durant, to me, is still the most dangerous guy on the floor, still alive in the playoffs. And that would be the ultimate argument of the best player available in the league on what would then be the best team if Brooklyn were to win it.
Yeah.
I didn't really answer your question, but I thought.
Well, I have said before the playoffs that I said there's 5 teams that can win. The Lakers because they had LeBron, the Clippers because they have Kawhi, the Bucks because they have Giannis, the Nets because they have Durant, and the Sixers because they have Embiid. But LeBron is now out. I'm not so sure about Kawhi. And I guess the next question, Sean, is, are we about to see a new face of the NBA in terms of new teams and new players that now can emerge as the best player on the best team?
Well, we're certainly looking at the next gen here, the next generation of guys. And I think that's, for me, what's been most fun about how these playoffs have progressed. And, one team that's not on your list there is Utah. And if you take the combination of Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, you could almost argue that Utah has as much of a fighting chance as anybody else. And Mitchell, all he did was score 39 a game in the postseason last year, and he's even better now. So you've got Devin Booker in Phoenix, Trae Young in Atlanta, Donovan Mitchell with the Utah Jazz. Jokic just won an MVP. Joel Embiid is finally coming to be the process that they had hoped all along. And then, of course, you've got, the Irvings and Durants and all that. But look at the star power across the league right now and the average age of some of these guys we're talking about. That's what leads me to believe that the league is, in good hands, and B, that we can have a conversation from now until July 4th, if you want, about who that best player or that new face is going to be.
Good stuff. So let me ask you this then. Where does Ben Simmons fit into this conversation? Because he's quite polarizing here in the Delaware Valley.
He should be, because I think amongst basketball people, he's quite polarizing across the entire NBA. You're talking about a physical, strong, big guard that can lock down people defensively. He can put up triple doubles almost whenever he wants, but he's still not a threat outside scoring. He still has a game where he scores 4, but yet you look at the bulk of the work and all the numbers add up. So what do you do with him? I have felt that way since he came out of LSU. And one day I will bang the drum for him, and the next I just assume not watch him play anymore.
Right.
That's what makes him so polarized.
Well, it's weird. He wins. He scores 17 points. They lose. He scores 4 and they win. It's like, I don't know. You see what Giannis is doing. And I guess we'll ask you, Sean, is, his limitations, are they the thing that basically keeps the Bucks from getting to where they ultimately go? But he's also the reason why the Bucks get to where they are. But his limitations, the Sixers seemingly have decided that we understand what Ben's limitations are, so therefore we'll just work around them. I don't know that the Bucks have done enough around Giannis. They need Giannis to score. The Sixers do not.
Right, and maybe Simmons is a little more well-rounded in the fact that, he had 4 points in the last game, but he also had 7 assists, and he did a really good job, as best you can, on Trae Young. So that helps his team win. Whereas if Giannis doesn't do what Giannis does, which is A, scoring transition, and B, attack the rim, Milwaukee's in big trouble. When Giannis decides to settle for a 3-point shot outside, you jump out of your chair when he makes one, but you halfway cringe when he jacks one up as opposed to going downhill. And again, if, like in Milwaukee's case, if they're constantly taking the ball out of the bucket, the other team is scoring, you don't get to run the transition that makes Antetokounmpo so good. But if you can get defensive stops, and look, he is a former Defensive Player of the Year. He has to be that again in this series to not only help them defensively, but also to get that ball in transition and create the chaos that Milwaukee thrives in the open floor.
Sean Kelly, the play-by-play voice of ESPN Radio's coverage of the Sixers and the Hawks. That coverage begins at 7 o'clock. The tip-off, they say 7:30. I'm going to bet closer towards 7:45, somewhere in that range. But that being said, the Hawks are unbeaten at home in the playoffs, and they've been almost unbeatable at State Farm Arena really since March. So I don't know. I mean, the Sixers going to roll into Atlanta. They're a 1.5 favorite in this game. They're going to roll into Atlanta and take care of business. Or do we feel that the Hawks are legit and they're at home and they should win on their home court?
They're legit at home. I mean, they've won 13 in a row at home. They're averaging around 118 points per game at home. They're holding opponents to 104. They're shooting 49%, I think, from the field and near that from three. And they've really embraced that environment there. And look, Atlanta is one of the strangest places in the league. During the regular season, it's one of the worst home atmospheres going. But in the postseason, it is like, I think Kendrick Perkins said it earlier this morning, Club ATL. I mean, the celebrities come out, the city comes out. It's a front-running town. So when their teams, Hawks, Falcons, whomever, is playing well, it's a great environment. And so obviously they're playing well and they're winning. And so therefore they've been able to feed off of that too. So I look for Atlanta to have a big game tonight. I think Trae Young bounces back and has a big game tonight. This is, if you're looking at the 4 series left, this one I think has the best chance to go in 7 games.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you feel that it's a realistic possibility that Philly comes out of this next 2 games down 3-1?
Very well could. Obviously the goal for them is to do exactly what Atlanta did in Philly, which is try and steal one of the 2. And that would be a great run for Philly in that case. So if we're looking at that, we're still no better than when we started with regard to who has control of the series. And look, if Atlanta wins the next 2 and Philly's down 3-1, I don't think there's something to panic about on the Philly side by any means, because they've been playing well at home too. And again, when you've got Joel Embiid, and if the knee can stay, relatively pain-free for him, he's a monster. So again, that's why I think the series is far from being decided. I don't think it'll happen, but I don't think there's any reason to overreact one way or the other after tonight's game.
All right, last one. Sean Kelly will call the action for Sixers and Hawks tonight with PJ Carlesimo for ESPN Radio's coverage of Sixers and Hawks. Bucks won that game last night. Is that one going to be a long one too, or did the Bucks get their token one?
I guess I'm not understanding the question.
The Bucks got a win last night. Most people thought the Nets were ready to run them off the floor. So do we have a series again, or do we think that the Bucks just got one and the Nets are ready to close this thing out in the next 2?
I follow you. My apologies. I still have my brain wrapped up around the Hawks and Sixers. No, it's interesting. My problem with Milwaukee is I think they scored 86 in one of the games and lost. They scored 86 again and won. They just can't score the ball right now, and I don't know why that is for a team that was so prolific during the regular season. Middleton looked better last night. Man, I don't know. I think Brooklyn can win the series even without Harden. I'd like to think Milwaukee can take one more to make this more of a series, but geez, there wasn't much last night, especially watching them blow the lead in the first half, that led me to believe that they had turned the corner enough for me to feel better about things.
Sean Kelly, PJ Carlesimo tonight on ESPN Radio. Their coverage begins at 7 o'clock, and you can hear that coverage here on 97.3 ESPN. Sean, have a good broadcast tonight, man. I appreciate you jumping on.
Thank you all, and good luck to you all, and enjoy the games this weekend.
We sure will. Sunday night and obviously Monday night, the Sixers are back. We'll have both games for you here on 97.3 ESPN. Sean Kelly, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. When we come back, it's Happy Hour Friday. You know what that means. The PT's here. We'll have a little fun with the PT when we come back on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. It is a happy hour Friday here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. And don't forget, if you're watching the live video stream at 97.3 ESPN on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, you can watch the show live in a variety of ways, and you can see our happy hour Friday edition. He is Pete Thompson. It is the Sports Bash Live on a happy hour Friday with the PT. You know, it's probably that Friday at 5 o'clock is like the most sought after segment on the radio. It's 5 o'clock everybody gets out of work. This is what everybody waits for, Peter.
Well, especially this Friday, since this Friday was my last Friday of teaching. By this time next Friday, I'll be doing the segment with you without having to have woken up at 5 in the morning to start my day. And we had the prom last night. We actually had a prom, and PT was the chaperone at the prom. I mean, I didn't even go to my own senior prom, and here I was going to a prom last night, watching everybody else have a good time. So
What, did you have a couple too many at the prom?
Me personally, no, but I mean, it's fatigue. I can't speak to what the students did, especially there's apparently now. Did you do this when you were in high school? Was there a senior skip day? We don't condone that, of course, but let's just say the halls were pretty wide open today at the educational place where I work.
I think that things have changed a lot. Like, our prom was like on a Friday night, and like the next day, like you didn't have a prom on a weeknight. Who does that?
Well, there you go. Maybe the people maybe they were looking for a deal. Maybe Thursday night was cheaper than Friday night. I don't know.
Yeah, I know that I did read like Mainland was supposed to have their prom outdoors. It rained, and there was a lot of rain, so they had to move it. There were
that was a whole hubbub about it. Yeah, the weather had gotten bad, and it was funny because everybody was so mad that they called off the prom for a day at Mainland, and then when they had the prom, or then like an hour later, it was like raining sideways, and they're like, "See, like, what do you want?"
Well, I remember that night. I was out to dinner, and the lightning looked like it was hitting the ground almost every single time that it came out of the sky.
Right.
And then you said, people, hey, I don't hear people talking about, I get it. Like, you are scheduling like a tux or your hair or your nails.
Sure.
Yeah. What are you supposed to do? I mean, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there. But at the same time, did you want your son or daughter dancing on the football field with lightning?
Yeah, I'm going to imagine that's a hard no. I mean, like, right. And that's the thing is so I think the radio folks know I work at ACIT, and they waited. There was a period of time where the people planning the prom were going to have it outdoors and find a way to have it, just to have a prom. And then the longer you waited, the better off your hand got. I think Ocean City had their prom outside on the football field. I know Holy Spirit had their prom at a local establishment, a local country club, and they were fine. And then Mainland had their prom finally, but like you said, it was postponed by a day. So the ACIT prom was at the convention center.
Now, we'll pull the curtain back a little bit here. This segment was not supposed to happen today. The PT was supposed to be running camera for the big Mainland Ocean City baseball game, but the game got postponed. It's going to be played tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Yes.
The segment was allowed to happen today because you were going to be back to your roots running the camera. And now because of the rain, I wasn't going to call the game today, but I now have been tapped on the shoulder to call that game tomorrow, Peter.
Which I think is awesome. I mean, listen, Ocean City Mainland in any scenario, it could be Ocean City Mainland Tiddlywinks. It could be Ocean City Mainland Parcheesi. It could be Ocean City Mainland Uno. It doesn't matter what the competition is. Those two teams going at it always provides an interesting and wonderful contest. And then you add into the fact that you've got a future major league draft pick in Chase Petty, who I saw today in one projection, the White Sox at like 23. Now that wouldn't be where did Trout go? Was he 21? Is that right? So if Petty went at
23, actually.
Oh, so that would be right on the nose. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. So that game's tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
I'll be there.
Are you there tomorrow?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I didn't know if you had like your thing that you got.
Oh yeah, that's that. No, that's the following Saturday. Now that's actually an interesting point. Yeah, my teacher training, or as I explain it to people, like they're like, so what is that? And I'm like, well, I'm basically back in college, and they're like, ooh, how's that going? And I'm thinking, well, the last time I was in college for any class, Bill Clinton was in his first term. It's been a while.
All right, Peter, I want to play something for you and then get your reaction. This was Doc Rivers today. Take a listen.
The top line is still trying to take away their easy baskets, take away their threes, take away Trae Young in transition. I mean, that is not going to change for us.
All right, so that's what Doc Rivers said about his defensive game plan. Not going to change much. You know, we want to take away Trae Young. So my question for tonight is, do you anticipate, you know, we talked about this earlier when Paul Hudrick was on. When the Sixers played the Raptors a couple of years ago, they got beat. Brett Brown made a great adjustment when he put Joel Embiid on Pascal Siakam, and that kind of changed that series a little bit. Well, then Nick Nurse made an adjustment and went big. The Sixers could not match them because they did not have another big to pair up with what the Raptors did. So, game one, the Hawks did something. Game two, Doc Rivers made the adjustment. He went Ben Simmons. He said, same situation. That's our mindset. Do the Hawks now have a chess move that they can make tonight, do you think? Or does Ben Simmons covering Trae Young say checkmate?
Right. It might say checkmate, and you're right. It's the adjustment to the adjustment. I did hear you talking about that on my drive home earlier today. And I think this, too. I mean, you know, I'm sure you spoke a lot about DeAndre Hunter going out and him missing the rest of the postseason and what that means, you know, for the Hawks. I mean, that's a big loss for those guys. And that's really what it boils down to is, can you keep Trae Young in human numbers? And I think in game one, they were unprepared for how good that gentleman actually is. I also heard you say, I think maybe this was yesterday, where you said, go ahead and let him take the three, you know, because he's actually not that good at taking threes. So fine, go ahead. You'll live with that. It's the problems of when he's passing the ball off that you run yourself into trouble because their other 3-point guys behind the line are so good.
Yes, exactly. Trae Young from 3-point range is only about a 34% shooter in the regular season. That's just below average, actually. So don't let the guys who shoot better percentage get good open looks. Make the guy who has the lowest percentage shoot more. And, hey, look, if he hits a couple of wild, crazy ones and he's 4 of 13, what's the big deal, you know?
Right. You'll live and die with him hitting a few, but and that's why in game one, you know, he is Trae Young, when he's at his best, is a facilitator first and foremost, and then scoring comes along with that. But it's Bogdanovich who you can't let kill you. It's other guys that can spot up behind the three and knock that down every single time. Now, to your point earlier, and I don't know that I fully answered that question, no, I don't think Atlanta has an answer for Joel Embiid. I haven't seen them provide one yet, and the numbers that he's putting up are pretty unbelievable.
I'm glad you went right into it, Peter, and I didn't even tell you to do so, because this is what Nate McMillan said today about that.
You know, he's a 5-man with guard skills. His ability to face up, draw the foul, you know, play one-on-one, play against double teams. What we feel we have to do, or we're going to try to do, is mix up our coverages. I think the first thing is to try to deny his catch as much as possible. And then if he catches the ball in a certain spot, we have to send double teams and get the ball out of his hands.
Okay, so all that, we got to send double teams. He's a big man with guard skills. Quite frankly, that's code word for, we can't stop this guy.
And they haven't been able to. And what's more amazing to me is that you know that he's not 100%. You know, I mean, are you kidding me? This is 85% Joel Embiid, and he's putting up 40 points in that win in game two.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up, because this is a team, you know, and I know, they have been overly cautious with injuries. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden, are they going from a team that is overly cautious with injuries to reckless? Like,
I wouldn't call them reckless. I think that at the end of the day, that they're basically at their point where they're saying to the guy, to Joel Embiid, big fella, what do you think? How are you feeling? You know, and ultimately placing that on him. I mean, obviously they're not going to throw him out there if they think that he's going to do further damage. So they've sat there and looked at what his ability are or is, and he said he has also admitted too that look, the way the injury is with him right now, there's going to be pain. But I think what's been a plus is at no point have you seen a situation where the day after the game or 2 days after the game that the guy's been, unable to function or unable to move. So thank goodness, because obviously, I mean, again, I brought up the Hawks injury to DeAndre Hunter earlier being out for the season. Can you imagine if they had no Joel Embiid? This would be an entirely different conversation if there was no Joel Embiid or less than an effective Joel. The guy's shooting over 51%, averaging about 29 points. That's ridiculous.
Okay, so I want to ask you this then, all right? Because, the PT's known to be a little wishy-washy, based on what day of the week it is or who's to do it more so than anything, right?
It's Friday.
Right?
Go ahead. Make your point. Go ahead.
So Ben Simmons scored 17 points in game 1, and they lost.
Mm-hmm.
Scored 4 points in game 2, but they won. So which Ben Simmons would you prefer in game 3?
The one that delivers the win. I got to be honest with you. Ben can drive me crazy at times. The hack of Ben strategy drove me crazy, when the guy can't make free throws and there's things. But Ben at his best is a facilitator and setting up other guys. If you get the good Ben that's going to make Tobias Harris better, that's, going to make some of the supporting cast better, I don't care how many points Ben scores, especially if Joel's scoring 40. My God, if Joel Embiid's putting up 40, you don't care that Ben's at 4. That's fine. And quite frankly, and you notice too, no MVP award for the Sixers, no Defensive Player of the Year award for the Sixers.
Right.
Those awards both went in a different direction.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Peter, because Embiid finished second in MVP and scored 40. Now, Simmons finished second in the Defensive Player of the Year last night. He gets to play tonight. Does he say to Trae Young, or does he show everybody, not only am I the Player of the Year, I'm now going to shut him down completely. I gave him 21 last game. See what I do to him tonight as the second best defensive player in the league, apparently.
It's a great scenario, and it's a very plausible scenario. You and I both know that, and the one thing that is a little surprising, too, is Ben is starting to come out of his shell a little bit and actually say what's on his mind. And, Joel's been that way always, but Ben Simmons has been more guarded, more close to the vest, and when people were ripping on him and Doc Rivers always would come to his defense and stuff, there was a few times during the season and early in the playoffs here where Ben's actually said, I don't care what they say about me. Yeah, well, you do when you don't win the Defensive Player of the Year. That may fire him up to have an even better game tonight. And I'm all for it. To win games in the playoffs, you have to win with defense. In game 1, the Sixers were way too slow to respond. The Hawks lit them up. They tried to get close, in that freaky ending, but they weren't able to come back over the top. In game 2, they open up a huge lead. It closes the gap, and then they're able to push and pull away a little bit thanks to their potential MVP, or who could easily have been the MVP, and Joel Embiid. So how does game 3 go tonight in Atlanta? And remember, let me ask you this. Were the Sixers as effective on the road, and have they been as good a road team during the season as they've been at home?
I heard something, Sean Kelly from ESPN, who's calling the game tonight nationally, was just on. He mentioned that they've won, I think, 13 straight at home. They've been one of the best home teams in basketball since the coaching change. And he said, look, Atlanta, during the regular season, it's kind of a sleepy beach town. But when the playoffs get here, it's like the sleepy beach town in the summertime. The place starts rocking because they're front-running fans out there. He admitted that they admit that. When the team's not good or the regular season, they don't go. But in the playoffs, the celebrities come out. There's a lot of celebrities live in Atlanta. They make that their home. So this has been one of the best home teams in basketball. They haven't lost in 13 games at home. They haven't lost in the playoffs at home either. So people are just taking for granted you're going to go down there and win a couple games against this.
Right. That's not very easy, and I would expect a loud and raucous arena tonight at State Farm Arena. I would imagine it would be just as hyped and as pumped as it was in South Philadelphia.
Yeah, well, remember, too, this is the first time that they've been in the second round for now. They've been in the second round more recently than the Sixers have. The Sixers haven't been in the second round of the playoffs since Allen Iverson took the team to the NBA Finals in the year 2000.
Year 2000.
Yeah, I did that the other day. And you get the reference, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It was good Conan O'Brien, the original Conan O'Brien.
Now, did Conan, is his show done?
Not yet. What is today? Today's the 11th. It's done next Thursday, I believe. Final guest is going to be Jack Black. I have not sat and watched Conan in probably 5 years, 7 years.
I haven't either.
A long time.
His show one time since it's gone to TBS.
But when I saw that Conan was ending, I started setting the DVR, and I have a couple in there. There's one with Charles Barkley I haven't watched. I did watch one that he had Lisa Kudrow on because they were in the Groundlings together, and they went to the same acting and improv class in L.A., and so I've watched a couple of them, but LA was so shut down that he was in this theater and they had cutouts. And then the only other human being that you saw was Andy Richter. There was no but they're starting to loosen the restrictions out there too. So at least his final shows, he'll have an audience. I mean, what's interesting? I was watching on CNN. I don't watch a lot of CNN. Okay. Sorry. I don't, but they've had a series. They probably had about 6 of them now called The Story of Late Night.
I've heard of it.
Oh, it's really good.
I haven't seen the show, but I listened to a podcast who's had one of the guys from that on his podcast each week to kind of bring it to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, they started way back with Jack Parr and The Tonight Show, and then they talked about Johnny Carson, how The Tonight Show started in New York, and then eventually they figured out, well, we got to move this to Burbank, and then how Johnny was the king of late night. And this has always been, I mean, still 30 years or 20 years later, this still fascinates me, the whole David Letterman, Jay Leno thing, and how Leno got The Tonight Show and Letterman didn't. And then, I guess it's been long enough that I forgot that, they basically set this 5-year plan where, don't worry, Conan, you'll take over. And so then he takes over and they move Jay to 10, which was a colossal failure, right? And then they take away the show from Conan and he has to leave, and TNT gives him the spot. And that's how he ended up on TNT in the first place. So
yeah, I remember that whole thing kind of happening like that. By the way, if you could see the text message thing, I'm trying to work here, okay? My phone has not stopped since 3:47.
What happened at 3:47 that everybody went bananas over?
It's Pete G, my old producer, and Todd Rank.
Oh boy!
Who, of course, is a weekly guest on the show for the Rank Report.
I heard you and Todd going at it yesterday. It was highly enjoyable. What's the topic?
Would you like to know the topic? I mean, it has not stopped since 3:47. If you look at it, I have not said a word in here, and it's just the two of them going back and forth.
Yes. What's the topic?
Right, Nadal versus Djoko, Tennis Channel, Pete G.
Oh, my God.
I mean, why isn't that on ESPN? Rank, extremely poor. They're going to show the rerun after everybody knows who wins. Awful. Okay, just starting.
So here's two guys watching the French Open.
Wow, down 5-4, 30-love, and Nadal comes back to even it at 5-5. I mean, this is great theater. NBC is missing out. I mean, this is great. Gosh. Amazing shot after amazing shot. These guys are bringing it at another level. This announcer just called this Hagler versus Hers.
That's really funny.
It's continuing to go back and forth. And I'm sitting here reading this the whole time while I'm trying to host a radio show.
Yeah, well, you're a good multitasker, but even that might throw you off a little bit. I mean,
both guys screaming, an 8-minute game. Nadal takes it. And he leads 6-5. We go to the tiebreaker in the third. Standard.
Yeah, that's funny.
They were texting nonstop about that Oklahoma team. No mention of them at all winning it yesterday. I mean, he's been wrapped up into those women's World Series.
The College World Series. How about the girl from JMU? Odyssey, what's her last name? The JMU upsetting Oklahoma was a great softball upset, and I was watching Nebraska baseball. Do you know that Nebraska baseball had to go up against Dave Van Horn, their ex-coach, who coached them to the College World Series in the 90s when I was there. So
He says 11 o'clock curfew in Paris, but they make an exception for this match. It will continue.
I can hear these guys going back and
So
forth.
can I. That's why I'm just like, what is going on? He says, right, the final for these guys, of course it is. The other match is for second place, and they know it. This crowd is great. I mean, God's sake.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah, I was enjoying you and Rank yesterday. What was the one where he was like, well, maybe they don't put Embiid on Young to start the game? And you're like, come on. Like, come on. Like, who do you really think they're going to put on this guy? Like, come on.
Let me ask you a quick question before we got to run here.
Yes, sir.
Do you have beef with Dave Weinberg?
No, that came out of left field when you threw that out at me. Maybe he was just searching for a name. I don't know. Weinberg and I get along just fine.
It sounded like he was searching for a name. It sounded like he was teeing that. Like he made a point to cut Josh off and throw you under the bus.
I mean, I guess in Weinberg's world, I'm Schweim. I don't know.
I said, I said the guy that he has to take the shot at is Schweim in that situation, not PT.
Yeah, you know the benefit of me producing Schweim's show, which I'll be doing again this Sunday, I now get a free Sunday paper. I get a free Inquirer minus the sports page. I get every section, the comics, and then when I looked at him kind of like, well, you're not going to give me the sports page? He's like, well, you get double the coupons. You get the coupons.
You got tomorrow you got a Billy and Bobby Schweim.
Oh yeah, that's gonna be epic. That's must-listen radio. Well, sure. It's basically what their poor mother had to go through growing up.
Man, that's tomorrow at 10 o'clock in the locker room. Billy's back on Sunday as well. All right, Pete Thompson, who wins tonight? And tomorrow, I'll get your thought on that in a second.
Yeah, who wins tonight? I believe. Well, I want the Sixers to win, obviously, but I actually believe the Hawks win this one. I think that. Yeah, I think it's close. I think it's within 5, but okay. I think the Hawks win this one.
By the way, someone just texted in, and this is how I know this guy's a bird brain. He says the beach is nowhere close to Atlanta. I didn't say that the beach was on Atlanta. I said it's the equivalent of like here. We're a sleepy beach town.
Okay.
And in the summer, everybody fills up the beach. In Atlanta, no one goes to the games in the regular season. Sleep down. And then when the playoffs come, everybody comes down, like when we fill up for the summer. I didn't say that Atlanta was near a beach, you jackass.
Yeah, well, listen, as somebody that's guilty of not listening that well.
How could you have gotten that from that?
It's amazing what people hear. They hear what they want to hear. And he or she wanted to make their point so quickly that they failed to comprehend, which is understand exactly what you said.
All right, Pete, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yep, looking forward to it, buddy. Take care.
That was Happy Hour Friday. We had fun. This text message is still going. I mean, they won't stop. Nadal lost, apparently. When we come back, Jeff Kerr. The Eagles have brought back a familiar face. We have the details on that signing coming up next on the Sports Bash, brought to you by Matt Blatt Kia. They want to get you approved today. Matt Blatt, 6211 Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. I am Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. 5:30 here on Friday evening as we get ready for the weekend. Don't forget Sixers and the Hawks tonight, game number 3. You can hear all the action on 97.3 ESPN. The coverage starts at 7 o'clock. Tip-off scheduled for 7:30. Of course, I think they typically will start a little later. We got NFL news, Eagles news, actually. We've been talking about it for a while. Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, he's their NFL writer. He joins me now on the Boardwalk Honda hotline. And the Eagles made it official today. What we've been talking about for a while, or we've been thinking about for a while, is that they have brought back a familiar face. Tight end Richard Rodgers is back with the Eagles. No surprise, really. But what's the message here, Jeff? To me, this kind of says that the Eagles think they are involved in the NFC East. Like, hey, we need a veteran tight end, because if they're a team that doesn't have high expectations, let's play a younger guy and get him some experience.
At least in my opinion, the Eagles have now insurance in case they ever move on from Zach Ertz, assuming they do. But if not, that's a pretty darn good top 3 tight end trio right there. You got Zach Ertz, you got Dallas Goedert, you got Richard Rodgers. And the Eagles didn't draft a tight end, I think, because they knew they were going to bring Richard Rodgers back. And Rodgers probably shouldn't have played as much as he did last year. But when he played, he was actually really good for Carson Wentz and for Jalen Hurts. So to me, this was a no-brainer signing.
Yeah, they obviously needed a backup tight end in the event they move Ertz, but they've also had Rodgers here with Ertz. So it seems that they like that trio, or they feel comfortable with Rodgers playing the role that he played a lot last year, because really Ertz and Goddard played very little together. They were hurt at both different times, and Rodgers was really the backup to both of those guys last year, and even had times where he had to play some extended snaps and showed that he can handle that. So bringing him back here, you would think that they're pretty set in the tight end room. I guess the next question is, bringing him back, does that make it more likely now that they try to move Zach Ertz?
I would say yes, and I would say no. It's kind of a cop-out, obviously, but you got to look at it this way, Mike. So how can I put this in words, though? Where is your team better if you trade Zach Ertz? No, I don't think so. We're just talking about, this team thinks they can compete. Well, why would you trade Zach Ertz if you think you can compete? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If you're Howie Roseman, then you're so far along in this thing. Unless Zach Ertz just flat out says, I am not playing this year, forget it. I'm not going to be a Philadelphia Eagle. You tell Zach Ertz, look, we expect you the first day of camp, and that's it, because he wasn't going to get fined for not showing up to mandatory minicamp, because there wasn't a mandatory minicamp. So pretty much they have 6 weeks to figure this thing out and see if Zach Ertz does want to come back. I ultimately think Zach Ertz wants to be a Philadelphia Eagle. Here's the problem, though. He wants a new contract, and the Eagles just don't want to give him one.
Right, and but the problem, doesn't Zach Ertz realize and see that nobody else wants his contract? So nobody else wants your contract. So why don't you just stay with where you're comfortable?
It's almost like the Moneyball situation, like from the movie, when Billy Beane goes to David Justice and says, look, why don't we both be realistic with each other here? The Yankees are paying you half your salary to play against them. That's almost
a great pull by you, Kerr.
I love that movie, so I had to use it. I love when he tells David Justice that, and Justice tries to tell him off. But anyway, it's kind of like the same thing with Zach Ertz. Why don't we get the last bit of good football left in you, Zach Ertz? And I'll tell you what, you can go wherever you want this offseason, but we're going to keep you for 2021, and we're going to try to win some football games, because we think we're a better football team with you and Dallas Goedert than with Dallas Goedert.
I think it's a great reference, by the way, the David Justice thing. Here's a guy, look, and I'm not saying Ertz doesn't deserve to think that he's a pretty good player. I don't think he's where Justice was in his career at that point, which was basically done. Ertz can still play, but nobody wants his contract. Isn't that evident? And he has to understand that. I'm not saying stay with where you're comfortable. No, I'm not telling anybody to just do something because you're comfortable. But he likes it here. He's just not happy with the contract situation. But open your eyes. Nobody else wants your contract either.
Exactly. The Buffalo Bills want you, but they don't want you at $12.5 million or $11.5, whatever his contract is. It's over $10 million. Yeah, 8.5. So there you go. It's the same thing with the Indianapolis Colts. I'm sure Carson Wentz would love to have Zach Ertz on that team. He's a better option than Jack Doyle or Mo Alley Cox, but they're not paying him what the Eagles are paying him. So if you want to get paid a lot of money and still be a productive football player, why not stay in Philadelphia? Nick Sirianni's going to take care of you. You can tell he's a player's coach. I think the Eagles are going to do whatever they can to try to mend fences at least for 6 more months.
Wait, okay. Mend fences. That's an interesting point, Jeff. Last year, he wanted the contract. Roseman didn't give it to him, and they had like a split there, a divide. So that being said, mending this, is it as simple as saying, look, I'm just, this is a business. We want you here, but nobody else. Like, does he do the Billy Bean thing and say, nobody else, we've tried. Nobody wants your contract. Although, does Ertz return and say to him, Jeff, hey, people have offered you stuff. And then the Eagles say, yeah, but they're offering us 6-round picks, man. Like, stay here. We got a new young coach. We got Dallas. We got we could surprise people. Like, do you think it is fixable, I guess?
I think it is fixable just because of that scenario you pointed out. If you're the Eagles, why would you just want to give this guy away for a 6-round pick? Are you kidding me? What are you going to get out of a 6-round pick? Okay, yeah, people mentioned Jason Kelce. How about the other 6-round picks that are terrible throughout the NFL, throughout all of eternity? You just don't find great 6-round picks. So why would you want to trade that? Yeah, if someone offers you a third for Zach Ertz, absolutely you do that. But the Eagles look, I think the Eagles really do think they can compete in the NFC East this year. And I don't have a problem with them thinking that. As long as Jalen Hurts plays at the level they think he's capable of playing of this year, they are going to compete in this division no matter what.
I agree with that in terms of, this division. I think Dallas is the favorite with Dak Prescott coming back. I think they should be the favorite. I think after that, it's pretty, wide open. I mean, I like Washington adding Fitzpatrick, but, the Giants.
I love the quarterback controversy there, though.
In Washington?
Yeah.
Give me the insight on that. Give me the insight on that.
Okay, so Ron Rivera basically talked yesterday and pretty much said there's going to be an open competition at quarterback between Ryan Fitzpatrick and Taylor Heineke.
Nick Sirianni has said there's going to be an open competition. I don't believe him.
Well, I don't believe him either, but it's a little bit more. Do you really think Joe Flacco's going to beat out Jalen Hurts? Like, I think there is a plausible scenario where
Taylor
I
don't think that.
Beat out Ryan Fitzpatrick.
What's that?
There is a plausible scenario where Taylor Heineke could beat out Ryan Fitzpatrick because they've seen what Heineke can do. But why would you pay that $2 million? So
I guess, all right, put it this way. I believe that that's more of a competition than, yes, the Eagles. I do agree with that. But I would say, I would compare it to when the Eagles said there was a competition with Mike Vick and Nick Foles.
To me, that was a legit competition, too. Remember that? I actually thought Nick Foles outplayed Michael Vick in 2013, but Foles threw that interception.
A lot of people thought Foles played better, but that's my point. They were predetermined to play Vick.
Yeah, it was almost like, okay, we'll see what Mike Vick can do in this offense. And if he fails, then we'll reluctantly go to Nick Foles. Well, it turned out well for Chip Kelly, and Chip Kelly just did not have faith in him. And that's why I thought it was so great when Nick Foles ended up winning the Super Bowl for the Eagles in 2017. It was almost like justice for, him getting, passed over and for Sam Bradford or whoever, because Chip Kelly just didn't like him.
Yeah. Jeff Kerr, CBS Sports, looking at some of the offseason stuff here. And obviously now, I was reading an article about the worst throws in football last year in terms of 3-strap, 2-strap, ones. Daniel Jones finished on that list in like half of them, and the other half was all Carson Wentz. And by the way, they kind of clumped Wentz and Hurts in together. But is Daniel Jones what's holding back the Giants?
I think so. I don't think Daniel Jones is as good as Giants fans actually think he is. And I think Daniel Jones has the potential to be good, but he doesn't have an offensive line. And let's be honest, he really is not a good pocket passer. You could say what you want about the guy. I think the Giants want to see how this guy does when he has a Kenny Golladay, a legit deep threat there, a Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney, a Sterling Shepard, actually has weapons to throw to. Evan Ingram even is one, with a healthy Saquon Barkley. I think they do owe it to themselves to see what they have in Daniel Jones, but as long as they don't have an offensive line, the problems with Daniel Jones are going to ensue. He makes bad decisions. Yeah, he can run the football. There's no doubt about that, but as a quarterback, he really hasn't shown me anything in 2 years. Like, I thought he would take if he took a leap, I didn't think he'd take a Carson Wentz type leap in year 2, but I thought he'd be a little better, like say, maybe a Baker Mayfield year 1 leap in year 2, and he just didn't do it.
Nope. And I was reading something today. They picked 6 teams. I think this is over at Sports Illustrated. 6 teams with losing records that could make the playoffs this year. The Giants were one of them. And I'm thinking, man, I'm not saying 0% chance. Everybody, the NFC East, I think, is going to be such a mixed bag. But Daniel Jones, to me, makes them I hate to say that he's worse than Hurts. I don't know about Hurts, but I feel better about Hurts. And I like what the Giants have done with their roster. I don't like the quarterback. That's what
I don't either. And you know what? I am not completely sold on Joe Judge either. Is the Ray Rhodes philosophy of we're going to outwork you going to work for as long as it can? Yeah, the players like him now. What happens if they start 5-5 again? Like, are they going to tune out on him? Remember, this Ray Rhodes thing worked with an inferior roster for about a year and a half, and then it all bottomed out. And we saw what happened in Philadelphia. In my mind, Joe Judge is pretty much Ray Rhodes at this point. We just don't know how much this motivation, this us against the world mentality can work. Yeah, did they make strides last year? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, they were only 6-10.
Jeff Kerr over at CBS Sports, you wrote a long-form piece. It was really good on Leonard Tose's wife. And, Leonard is an interesting figure in Philadelphia Eagles lore. People kind of looked at him as, like this drunk who almost allowed the franchise to leave town. But in the end,
the team, essentially.
Right? But in the end, tell us a little bit of the story about why Tose is a little underappreciated in his family.
Well, I love talking to Marnie Snyder about this, and I've talked to Marnie for a number of years about Susan, and and I almost forgot her mom was the first woman GM. Because we were talking about women making strides in football. We're like, wait a minute, wasn't Susan Tost an actual GM for the Eagles? And turned out she was. So we started talking about it, and that came up with the idea for the story. But I really wanted to get into the Eagles moving to Phoenix because Susan Tost Spencer was right in the middle of that. And everything that was going on. And pretty much like Pete Rozelle was after Leonard Tost for gambling and, his alcoholism and a bad stain on the league. And the Eagles were losing money. I think everybody kind of knew that. And they were looking at minority owners to jump in there and help them out. I think one of the guys in the Minnesota Vikings ownership group was going to do it, and he eventually backed out. So they looked at this Phoenix option, and Baltimore just moved to Indianapolis. Teams were relocating. The NFL really wanted a team in Phoenix, so again they contacted the Eagles, and what good businessmen do. And Susan Tost Spencer was a really good businesswoman. She really was, and you have to consider all the options. And pretty much it came down to, if you go to Phoenix, you're going to make, up to $200 million, and you're going to keep the ownership of the Eagles franchise. But at the end of the day, the Tostes just did not want to leave. Leonard Tost was an Eagles fan through and through. He did not want to leave Philadelphia. This was his home. And, they talked about it. And at the 10th, 11th hour, Susan Tost was the same way. They just did not want to leave this city. And they got so much backlash for even considering moving to Phoenix when they could have done it and still own the franchise. Instead, they decided to stay, and they got so much public backlash for it. And they could have kept the Eagles as the owners, but just all the public backlash from it, it's a shame. It really is, because he sold the franchise. And yeah, a lot of his gambling debts did play a role in that, but they could have afforded to stay. And they just said, you know what? It was either move the Eagles to Phoenix or lose the team. And they decided, we want to keep the Eagles in Philadelphia. We'll sell the team. They sold to Norman Brayman, and the rest is history. But it is a real shame, Mike, because the Tostes brought winning football back to Philadelphia. They haven't seen since the early 1960s. And Leonard Tost, it took him a few tries, but he eventually got it right, got the personnel in there. Susan Tost Spencer, the strike killed the Tostes. It really did. Susan Tost Spencer, she did as much as she could. She brought Randall Cunningham in, tried to compete with the stars of the USFL, brought in Kenny Jackson, drafted him. I wish she would have had more than pretty much 2.5 years to see what she could have done, because Norman Brayman wanted to keep her around, and she just felt too uncomfortable being, the daughter of the former owner, and now with the new boss, it was just weird. And they obviously moved on to other ventures, but it's a shame. Leonard Tost, everybody remembers him as this compulsive alcoholic drunk who just got rid of all his money in Atlantic City, and he doesn't even know how much money he got rid of in Atlantic City.
Yeah.
Ironically, I mean, it really is a shame what happened to Leonard Toast, but overall, like, they did a lot of good things for the Eagles and a lot of good things for the city of Philadelphia. And could you imagine, Mike, the Phoenix Eagles?
No. Every time I think about that, we had the Phoenix Eagles. It was when Buddy Ryan went out there with Seth Joyner and Clyde Simmons. And
remember when they played them on like Sunday Night Football? I think it was like 95. And I just remember, like, I rewatched that game the other week and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is so weird.
You rewatched an Eagles-Arizona Cardinals game from 1989?
1995, I watched it. It was a team. For some reason, I forgot what the NFL was like on TNT, and I wanted to watch Vern Lundquist call a football game. And my God, was Randall Cunningham absolutely terrible that game? It was his final days as Eagles starting quarterback. I'm like, how did this team end up making the playoffs?
Real quick, you mentioned that the NFL was on TNT. They had half the season, right? And then the other half was on ESPN.
Yeah, ESPN had the second half. Yeah.
Right. You remember who the play-by-play guy was on ESPN?
It was Mike Patrick.
Yes, Mike Patrick. Good call.
Yeah, you know what? It was funny. I used to like that group, but I didn't like Theismann. I remember when Paul McGuire moved over for NBC. I was like 10 years old at the time. I was so fascinated with broadcast. I will say this, Mike, no disrespect to today's broadcasters. And, I love my CBS crew to death. Nance and Romo are awesome, but man, every week it felt like we had a good broadcasting crew in the 90s, whether it was Pat Summerall and John Madden or, when CBS got back, I thought Gumbel and Sims were a really good duo. And, back when Summerall and Madden were at CBS, but TNT had a good group. And who could beat Al Michaels, Dan Dierdorf, and Frank Gifford? They made Monday Night Football a show.
Yeah, Mike Patrick, I remember because I was at WVU at the time. He was from Clarksburg, West Virginia, about 25 minutes up the road. He is Jeff Kerr. Read that piece about Susan Toast over at CBS Sports and follow him on Twitter at Jeff Kerr CBS. It's a real long form piece, but it's worth your time about, hey, quite frankly, why the Eagles are still in Philadelphia, and that piece really does a great job explaining it. Jeff, appreciate it, man. Have a great weekend, and we will catch up with you on Monday.
Yeah, sounds great. By the way, I do have to ask you before we leave, do you think Philadelphia would have gotten another NFL team if they would have moved to Phoenix?
Yeah, absolutely. Don't you?
Yeah. Hopefully it wouldn't have taken 13 years like Baltimore.
That's a good point, and you took Baltimore to get a team from another team to move there before they got an expansion team.
Yeah, it's weird how the Cleveland Browns came back, too.
Can you imagine having no football team? That would be awful.
I don't know what this city would do. What would anybody do if we didn't have an NFL team?
Man, that's a terrible thought. You ruined my happy hour Friday. Thanks a lot.
I'm sorry, Mike.
All right, Jeff, take care, man.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike.
And Jeff Kerr, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. We're back, of course, to wrap up the show with the sound of the day, and we'll get thoughts as game night tonight takes you till Sixers and Hawks at 7 o'clock with Josh here on 97.3 ESPN. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. All right, here we go. Don't forget tonight you can listen to all the action on 97.3 ESPN as the Sixers take on the Hawks. Now, Dave McMenamin from ESPN was a guest of Game Night on Thursday night with Josh, so he said some interesting things we want to kind of highlight here as we get ready for the game. Now, Dave McMenamin said something that I'm not so sure that all Sixer fans agree with, but here's what he had to say about, everybody says you got to have superstars, multiple superstars. Do the Sixers.
Kudos to the Sixers organization for, even though they've made some major shakeups over the last 5 years, changing over the front office a couple times, changing over the coaching staff, to recognize that let's give these guys patience and see if they can figure it out together. The last team that had the guy who finished second in MVP and second in Defense Player of the Year was the Los Angeles Lakers, who won the championship last year. And that's a special type of combination to have.
There you go. So he says the Sixers, in fact, do have a special combination.
Yeah, it's just not, two guys scoring 30 points a game.
Right, it's not Shaq and Kobe.
Right. It's not Durant and Harden and Kyrie.
Well, we're like in love with this whole notion of the two scores.
It's not love. It's obsession. It's a lust that people have for a certain style of basketball that is much more rare than they realize.
Well, and to be honest, and to be fair to the casual fan or the person who, once no one else has really done it in the fashion where the shotgun rider is not an offensive player, where their perceived second guy isn't counted on to score.
Correct.
Okay, I could say Rodman, but they had Pippen.
Right.
And I don't think people perceive Harris as Pippen. That's the problem.
Correct.
If people thought Harris was Pippen, then Simmons being Rodman you would feel comfortable with that, I think.
But people hold on to this. He was drafted number 1 overall thing.
Yeah, I don't care about that.
And people for some reason hold on to it like it's
at some point you are what you are. You need to now readjust your
right. Now you got to move on.
Right. You now need to readjust your expectations. You wanted at number 1, you wanted LeBron James. You're not getting LeBron James. This is what you have. Now appreciate what you have. You have a different form of greatness. It's not the greatness you want, but it's greatness nonetheless.
It's the greatness you need.
This team needs them. I get asked a lot, would you trade this guy for Simmons and that guy? Do I like this guy better? Yeah, if you're asking me scoring-wise, absolutely no questions asked. But this Sixer team needs Simmons' defense, because if you give me a guy like Dame Lillard, who's not a great defensive player, this team's in trouble.
Absolutely.
They need Simmons' defense to make this team work. That's the problem.
It's like the line from The Dark Knight. I'm the hero the city needs, not the hero the city wants.
Can you imagine if Ben Simmons hits the game-winning free throw in Game 7 of the NBA Finals?
I thought you were going to say, could you imagine if Ben Simmons was Batman?
Well, if he hits like a game-winning three-pointer as the buzzer is ready to go, and they just throw him a pass, and he's like, "Oh my God!" He just shoots it up.
Oh, the city would lose their minds.
Josh will have more on Game Night tonight.
Yeah, we got Kevin McCormick tonight.
All right, McCormick's in the house from Sports Illustrated and 97.3 ESPN. Tomorrow, Ocean City and Mainland, 11 o'clock. I'll be calling that action.
Hey, now.
Great baseball game. I love baseball. And McGarry is right. You don't like Major League Baseball? Check out how different a high school baseball game is. It's baseball in its purest form. Bunts, steals, hit and runs. Good stuff. All right, Josh is up next. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll talk to you Monday.